Coming up on Chasing the Natty, the transfer portal is officially open and the infinite possibilities of it are here for us to enjoy. We'll be breaking down all the transfer news since last Monday and let you know how this will impact CFF 2023, both good and bad. To help us break all this down, we have Chris K. and Brandon Sanders from the CFF team at Campus Canton joining us. All this and more coming right after this.
Look at the tornado go! An extra gear for the freshman! Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores!
What a burst! Trayvon Henderson! As advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning, getting close to Christmas. Hope all of your workplaces are just kind of slowing down maybe just a little bit, or everything's getting super hectic and you can't keep up with anything anymore. Just like the transfer portal and all the news that we got to get to on that today. But again, welcome back, guys. I got two awesome guests here with me from the CFF team here at Campus Canton. You know one of them from the Burning the Red Shirt podcast, and the other one you know from, actually, you know both of them from the Bet on C2C podcast, and then you know one of them from the Burning the Red Shirt podcast, and the other one you know from the Future Freshman podcast as well. Please welcome on Mr. Chris K. and Brandon Sanders. Chris, first to you, sir. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Can't complain. I'm excited for bowl season. I'm excited for portal season. It's been extremely insane, to say the least. So it's going to be fun to talk about and see what everybody else thinks about all these different moves.
Oh, yeah. We got so many different names we're going to be getting to today. But Brandon, before we get to that, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Finally got a Sunday off and getting used to the new job. This is going to be way better than watching my Denver Broncos play because they are not riding at all. And Russell Wilson still owes us $200 million. But other than that, I am excited for bowl season, and I'm excited to talk it up with you guys. The transfer portal is red hot, and I'm excited to get into that and talk about it. So just happy to be here and back on the feed. It's good to be back.
Yeah, both of you guys have been doing awesome work for the CFF community as well. I loved you guys' Bet on C2C podcast throughout the season. You guys did a great job with that. Chris K., you, Andrew, and Zach over there have been killing it with the Burning the Red Shirt podcast. Easily a weekly listen for me every week now. Brandon, I know Bet on C2C is an in-season show, but Future Freshman podcast, can we expect that to be hopping up here pretty soon?
Pretty soon. We're actually we're waiting until, of course, you've seen it on the feed that we're having early signing day, December 21st. So we're waiting for that to hit. There is a interview, I believe, at the beginning of the new year. I think we're going to have a guy from Penn State that you might want to hear from. So look out for that. We'll have Collin joining me for that one, since he's a Penn State guy himself. So we'll be doing an interview there. That's going to kick it off. We're going to do like a recap of what happened in 2022. And then sure enough, sir, after that, I'll be contacting the guys from The Official, and we'll be doing a cream of the crop for 2023 and getting the ball rolling. So I'm excited. We did pretty decent with the Big Fish, Small Pond, so I'm excited to get back to that. There's some diamonds in the rough that I'm ready to bring to the world here. So I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah, I'm stoked as well. Chris, what are you guys doing over there with Burning the Red Shirt? What can we expect from you guys over the next couple of months?
We've just been doing a lot of 2023 stuff. Well, I think that our best stuff is more just random conversational conjecture about what's going to happen 6 months down the line. I think that was our most fun stuff. And I think also too, like, reception has always been fun. We just did like a mock draft recap with Froton, which that guy is an absolute trip, but the dude's a genius. It's hilarious that those things can be together. But I think consistently talking bowls, talking 2023 and things like that. And, I was going to give you some props here, Jared. I don't know if you've listened to this past week's podcast, but we called Mike Bainbridge the hardest working man in CFF. And then I also threw it that you had to be one of the best or hardest working in the space as well. So you've done one hell of a job, Brandon, as well. But You for sure have been crazy busy this season.
Well, I appreciate the flattery, Kay, and I will send the check to your mailbox here in just a little bit.
Thank you. My Venmo is Chris K2. Thank you.
There you go.
There you go. Shout out.
Yeah, let's get right on into this. We got a ton of guys to talk about here. We'll get to the transfer portal here in a bit. But first, we also got to talk about some of these coaching changes that have been kind of going on here. And, oops. Let's get it on the right guy here. There we go. We got 4 different coaches that we can talk about here. Some of them moving head coach to head coach. Some of them going from offensive coordinator position to offensive coordinator position. But it's not very often you get a guy out there who goes from a head coaching position to an offensive coordinator position. Very incredible job here from Deion Sanders, the new head coach over at Colorado, for pulling this one off. Sean Lewis, the head coach of the Kent State Golden Flashes, going to join, like I said, Deion Sanders over there at Colorado. Very big move for Colorado right here. I think this will help them getting an offense off the ground and moving very quickly. You got Shedeur Sanders, more than likely, I would say near 100%, going to be the starting quarterback there, a dual threat guy in his own right. And I think Sean Lewis is very easily able to work with guys like that. We've seen with Dustin Crum. We've seen it with Collin Schlee this past year. Should hit the ground running real quick and make it a very, very attractive spot for offensive talent here. Kay, we'll start with you here first. What do you think about this move right here?
I love this for Deion. I think everybody agrees Deion is a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. But he's kind of playing CEO role here. You know, he's recruiting, he's getting boosters, getting money. And, oh, yeah, let me bring in like this insanely young, great offensive mind. I think this is incredibly great move for him. Very selfless in a sense, right? Like, I don't know what he's going to have his hands on, but bringing in a guy like him, and I think their defensive coordinator, too, is another big time name. So I love this for Colorado. Like, if you're thinking that Colorado could have success day one or year 2, day one, you know, it has to be with moves like this. So I think from a fantasy perspective, it's awesome. And then I think from just a wins and losses perspective, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon, what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's fantastic as far as offensively. That was something I was looking at. The great thing about Prime is that when Prime time, he's a recruiter. He's a guy that's been at the NFL level. So he knows how to develop those kids and knows what to expect. So he comes from that aspect. So a CEO mindset from Deion and then getting these guys to be their X's and O's is kind of what we were hoping that he would do. And then bringing on these great things, just like Kay was saying. I think it's fantastic. And I think it's very smart of Deion. And I think it's a good one. And we've seen it all over the place, whether you're watching 24/7 or on 3, or, you know, the videos and stuff that are coming out. Like, Deion's all over the place right now. And there's some of these guys we'll talk about here later where he's got his hands in the cookie jars and everywhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a quick turnaround. And we're looking at, I wouldn't necessarily say USC level, but I would think, you know, this is going to be a very steady decline or incline, excuse me. And then we're going to see some Pac-12 where Colorado is actually not, it's going to be a competitive team and possibly reach a bowl game if all goes well. So we'll have to wait and see. But this is a great hire, and I expect some people from that Kent State area to maybe follow suit to Colorado, but we will see.
Yeah, I would love to be able to just point to different players and say, like, this is going to benefit him with fantasy, benefit with him. The problem is the people who are most likely to benefit are probably not on campus yet. Again, Shedeur Sanders probably the only one here I could definitely point at here. Whatever wide receivers they get out of the portal should definitely benefit here. We will definitely see. Let's move on over to another one here. We got, this one kind of caught a lot of people off guard, but at the same time, in some ways it makes sense. We got Scott Satterfield, the head coach at Louisville, moving over to Cincinnati. Cincinnati head coach position opens up after Luke Fickell goes off to Wisconsin. They start their own head coaching search, and they land with Mr. Satterfield here. Satterfield has brought us CFF legends like Malik Cunningham. We have seen him do very well in these ACC and AAC conferences before. Brandon, we'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts overall on this one?
So when a lot of people think about that, they think of Cincinnati, you know, as like almost a step down, but that's not the case because Cincinnati is now becoming a P5 team starting next year. So this is actually more of a, I wouldn't even say a lateral, more of just a horizontal, you know, type move here. So I think it's great. Cincinnati has some pieces there. I'm kind of concerned about the Tyler Scott share that I have, but other than that, I think Satterfield's a good mind. I think whoever does take the helm there at Cincinnati is in for a lot of production, because as we saw with Cunningham and then the ones before him, that they definitely like to move out of the pocket and be a little bit freer with there. I'm just a little worried about the wide receiver room a little bit, but we'll wait and see what he comes up with and who he's looking at. I haven't really heard if they're keeping the OC or not. You guys will have to kind of keep me posted on that, but I don't know if he's bringing his own crew or not. But as far as Satterfield as a mind, he's a great coach, and I think this is a good horizontal move for him. Maybe he just wanted to change the scenery, but keep a lookout for his quarterback next year. I'm kind of digging that so far.
Yeah, one named Evan Prater, unless he transfers out of there. I actually think this makes him a lot more of an attractive option next year. Kay, what do you think about that?
Natty was a fairly fun spot for fantasy purposes beforehand. Not great for receivers, but great for, we saw like Desmond Ridder be super productive. Malik Cunningham is like a more dynamic, faster version, but like Ridder is obviously really athletic and talented. This doesn't move the needle that much for me because I think that Cincinnati was and can be a very productive spot for CFF. So I like the move, but it's definitely not a downgrade. I'm not looking at it like, oh my God, now this is where shares of XYZ have just gone, they're going to go to die, right? But this doesn't move the needle as much as probably, the Colorado situation here, and then the next couple guys that we're going to talk about. I think those really have an impact on CFF.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Also, just to clarify, I'm maybe I'm being a little paranoid here. I feel like I accidentally said Desmond Ridder instead of Evan Prater earlier. And just to be clear, I'm talking about Evan Prater, the quarterback at Cincinnati, not a guy who's not been there for 2 years.
No, you said. Yeah, I think you said
right.
Prater.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Like, I don't know why. Like in the back of my mind, all of a sudden I started thinking. I was like, did I say Desmond Ridder? I'm going to sound like such an idiot if I said Desmond Ridder. Anyway. Satterfield moves on from Louisville. Of course, Louisville has to go and hire their own guy, and they get the guy that we pretty much have been expecting them to go and try to get for the last couple of coaching cycles, and that is Jeff Brohm out of Purdue. Brohm, being a Louisville alumnus, just makes a lot of sense right there. He runs a very pass-heavy system, very good offensive system over there at Purdue. Bring it over to the ACC where the defenses are not nearly as stout. I think there could be a lot of fun to be had here in Louisville with Jeff Brohm at the helm next year. We'll get into who his possible quarterback of the future there with Aidan O'Connell going off to the NFL this year. Kay, what are your initial thoughts on Brohm going to Louisville?
I think this is great. I mean, we saw Purdue consistently churn out productive quarterbacks, receivers. I mean, even this fantasy in terms of like DFS season, we saw running backs be super productive, which has been awesome. They get them involved in the passing game, which is always clutch when you're not super talented as a running back in an offense. But I think this is great. I think there's one specific player that could go there that makes it a really fun situation. But ACC doesn't, like you were kind of mentioning, Jared, like the ACC is going to have a better CFF aspect for Brohm and his offense, because I think the Big Ten typically tries to go a little bit slower, a little bit more run heavy, a little cold, snow and all that crazy stuff. So, I mean, this is about as good as it gets, right? I think Louisville players now are very relevant. And they have a lot of talented receivers, and they always have. It's just been kind of this offense like Satterfield and ones before. It just haven't been super inclined to focus on one or two guys and like create those big seasons, big games.
Yeah, you gotta love it if you're holding on to Tyler Hudson from this past year in like a dynasty league. You gotta love the way the things turn events have happened here. Marshawn Ford, if he comes back another year, that could be really interesting. We saw Peyton Durham do really well for CFF this past year. I believe he was tight end 4 on the year. So maybe we get a bounce back year from Mr. Ford. Brandon, what are your thoughts on this?
Very close to what Kay said. I'll go ahead and say it. The ACC is the Power 5 version of the MAC. So basically, if you're looking for anything offense, the ACC is where you want to attack. So I think this is very clever. I forgot what statistic I saw, but Brohm is his offense in particular. Like he runs ton of passes. And with the quarterback that we're probably going to discuss here very shortly that could be coming in, that's tied with Brohm, that's very, very intriguing. And I think this could be very, very beneficial. Like you're saying, had Marshawn Ford on a dynasty for 2 years and had to sit him multiple times. It would just be nice to use him one more good year before he moves off to the sunset. So needless to say, this is great for CFF purposes. Brohm is excellent, and we saw what he did. There's one wide receiver that they're going to hyper focus. Shout out to CF redraft star, Mr. Chuck Sizzle, aka Charlie Jones. That pairing, and if we start seeing something like that with the possible incoming quarterback and maybe a wide receiver he becomes friends with and starts to hang out with in the offseason, we'll look for that. But that could be the combo, guys. And I think in the ACC, that's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of ACC, we'll go to a guy who is changing schools within the ACC. This one caught me off by surprise quite a bit. I knew this guy would be a pretty hot commodity. I didn't think that this would be the school he would go to, though. Robert Anae, the offensive coordinator at Syracuse, former offensive coordinator at Virginia, the guy who made guys like Bryce Perkins and Brennan Armstrong household CFF names. He is now going off to his third ACC school here. He has been hired as the offensive coordinator over there at North Carolina State, which is quite the move after we have gotten used to NC State being kind of this more conservative offense. Maybe CFF relevant here and there. Devin Leary had a really nice year, but that's because they really gave him all the touchdowns that year. They couldn't get any kind of run game going there. But now you bring in a guy who has made, like I said, Brennan Armstrong. This past year, Garrett Schrader looked really good. If you have an MJ Morris share, you got to be hopping out of your seats here, at least hoping they don't bring in like another quarterback here. Again, we can get to that just here in a little bit. But Brandon, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Robert Anae going to North Carolina State?
Well, one, for the rivalry purposes, a little bit tougher. Will be an interesting matchup. At least we're going to get a lot more of an offensive one. NC State likes to ground and pound, but not anymore. It seems like to open it up. This is really good for your shares of guys like Porter Rooks. We'll drop a name for freshmen coming up. Javonte Vereen coming out of going to be a tight end there at NC State. He's a good one to look at. And also the guys like Devin Carter, who might be coming back for another year. So this is really, really great for that. Hoping MJ Morris stays because I like MJ Morris in his play. But there is a rumor about another quarterback, and we'll talk about that. But if he comes in with the arm that he has, man, what a division. This part of the not the coastal, but the Atlantic division of the ACC is going to be. Definitely, we'll be looking forward to the Louisville NC State matchups there in that division. That'll be pretty awesome.
Okay, what are your thoughts, man?
I think it's great. I mean, there's what's really interesting to me is they need running back help. They need receiver help in terms of like solid producers that proven things. Like I think they have some random players that can definitely show out, but like in this transfer portal era that we live in currently, it's like we have all these dudes on the East Coast that have hit the portal that we'll talk about. And I think if they don't get one or two of those guys, right, I could see them getting a receiver or running back and a quarterback, all from different schools, and it would all make sense and be super helpful for them. Like they can't be rolling out Jordan Houston again at running back. No. Like, they just can't, right? Like, and they have some talented guys for sure. I think it was Timmons was the freshman, right? Brandon, that was really pretty good out wide as a receiver for them. But like, you need some dudes here in this offense. And in like UVA years back, like 3-4 dudes were super productive. So I think this is a really fun one. I think at Syracuse, he saw that, if he could get out of there and make some money and go somewhere else in like a big time top notch program like an NC State, which isn't insanely high, but it's a good program for sure. Why not, right? So I think that was a smart move for him and a great move for CFF players for sure.
And the one last thing I'll add on here is that for those of you who might be lamenting your Garrett Schrader shares, like when you first heard this news, fear not. The quarterbacks coach over there, I forget his name off the top of my head. Oh my goodness. What was that, Kay?
The former BYU quarterback?
Yes, Beck is staying over there at Syracuse. He has been promoted to the offensive coordinator. A lot of people, there's been rumors saying that he is actually the one who really kind of drives that system over there, or at least knows how to run it well enough to where you shouldn't fear too much for your Syracuse guys over there. They're going to be running a very similar system next year. So that is our coaching changes. We'll get over here to the transfer portal. But Kay, you know what one of my favorite parts about having you on the show is?
Is it lamenting about how wrong I was on certain people?
No, it's the fact that you can't skip this part like you do when you listen to the show, because you got to listen to my spiel.
Oh no, a spiel. Okay,
I got to listen to the
dogs real
spiel.
It's been updated.
If you guys are listening to this on podcast, make sure you're following us. Make sure you are leaving those 5-star reviews. Those are always fantastic. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Love talking to you guys down there in the comment section. Love hearing your thoughts on all of these things, whether it be coaching hires, transfer portal news, guys. There's so much to talk about. Like, don't be shy. There are no dumb questions. There are no dumb comments. I love discussing it all with all of you guys. We are part of the CFF team here at Campus of Canton. It is myself, Nate Marquise, Brandon Sanders, Chris Moxley, Chris K, and Ethan Sowers. We got all sorts of content coming at you guys. We got podcasts, articles, rankings. CFF ADP will be returning starting in January. We'll be getting that up and rolling. Chris K has been doing an awesome job, as well as Ethan Sowers and Brandon Sanders. They've been doing a great job with the CFF DFS, making you guys a ton of money throughout the season. So absolutely continue to listen to them. See, I cut it down, Kay. It's so much shorter than it used to be.
Dude, the transition was incredible.
Thank you.
Like, I didn't even see it come in. You just straight smoothly got it in there. That's great. Props.
That's the best part, is trying to get Kay to be off guard, so he doesn't even know it's coming. That's what
I had no idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was great.
Just
well
completely
done.
blew by him. Go check out all the awesome content we got over at campusatcanton.com. Very easy to navigate website now. You can absolutely find everything you need for your Devy, C2C, and CFF leagues over there. Gentlemen, let's get into Portalpalooza 2023 edition. It has been an absolutely wild this past weekend. The transfer portal officially opened up this past Monday on December 5th. For those of you who don't know, NCAA has changed the rules slightly this year to where there are now transfer portal windows rather than you can transfer in and out pretty much whenever you want. You have to enter and exit the portals by certain dates. December 18th is the close of this transfer portal window, and I believe there will be a shorter window opened up after spring practices, so that people, once they figure out where they are on the depth chart, they can change after spring, but it'll be much shorter. This is where we're going to see a lot of the big moves coming into the 2023 season. We saw it in 2022. This period during the bowl season, during the national championship time, that's when you saw a ton of the big moves. And I just realized the graphic says December 18th. It's supposed to say January 18th, 2023. So, gentlemen, we're going to start with the quarterbacks here. And the first one we'll start with here is the one that really caught a lot of us off guard in the CFF community. We were fully expecting this guy to be a first-round CFF asset next year with the way that he performed this year, a top 5 quarterback in CFF. We're, of course, talking about Mr. Austin Reed, quarterback out of Western Kentucky. He is in the portal, as well as several other Western Kentucky players. We're still waiting on maybe one or two other ones that we're keeping our eye out for, but they haven't officially entered in, so we won't say their names just yet. But Chris, real quick, I should also mention that currently he does have one crystal ball logged in on 247 for him to go to Louisville. That is the quarterback that we were talking about earlier with Jeff Brohm. So, Kay, tell me what you think about Austin Reed transferring, and what do you think about him possibly landing with Jeff Brohm over there?
I think super surprising to see him enter the portal, but it makes a lot of sense now with Brohm going to Louisville. It's like, okay, well, Austin Reed has been in college football for so many years at this point, but he's been super productive. He's won a bunch of awards and things like that. So I think we were all surprised and shocked when it came out that he was entering the portal. This is a perfect fit. I think also, I know we'll talk about another gentleman here shortly, probably, but I think a NC State makes a lot of sense with a Robert Anae. I think Louisville's the sure-on, no-brainer selection, which would be incredible for him for fantasy purposes. And, he's a good coach, right? Brom's a good coach, so that's a good fit from a development perspective. So that'd be good for him there. It's also in the state of Kentucky, which is where he's been. So like there's a lot of dots that connect, which makes a lot of sense. And if you're Reed, you're not going G5, right? Like
No.
you're not going to the portal to go to like another, school that is similar to Western Kentucky. You're going to go to a bigger program and bigger games to show that you have the talent to play even further. So I think this would be, I think this is a win-win. I think if Reed goes to Louisville, it's a win for fantasy, players. I think it's a win for Reed. I think it's a win for Brohm. Super similar to the previous quarterbacks that he's had, but probably a little bit more athletic and versatile. He's not like a crazy runner, but he's pretty good runner. So it's an incredible fit. This is about as good as it gets, like in terms of where he could go. So I think we all hope that he lands at Louisville.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Outside of him just returning to Western Kentucky and staying in the system that made him a CFF darling this past year, Brandon, what are your thoughts on Austin Reed and the possibility of him going to Louisville?
Well, first we got to talk about the Slack channel went on full meltdown as soon as this happened. We went pure panic, speculation abound everywhere. Immediately, my sister from another mister, Miss Hannah Page, everyone was hitting her up like, "What is going on? What's going on?" So poor Hannah was probably in the middle of work and probably was getting these crazy weird texts anyway. So shout out to Hannah for keeping composure during the whole process. But we're freaking out because Western Kentucky is like a gold mine in CFF. This is literally the tree that had at one time Mike White, who's starting for the Jets, Bailey Zappi, who is the CFF king. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we wanted Austin Reed to maybe have only 50% of his production. Well, he had like 60 or 7% was the QB5. So I was like, man, this is as good as it gets, right? And then he enters the portal and we're like, oh no, he's going to go P5. And then with the speculation was abound, like, oh no, he's going to get stuck at a place where they don't do it. What if he goes to Florida? Please no, don't do that. Sorry, Alfred. But then we heard that he had a connection with Jeff Brohm. So I breathed a little easier. I was like, okay, Purdue's not terrible if he stays there. But when I heard that Brohm was likely going to Louisville, I was like, this is as good as it's going to get. If he's going to go to P5, why not do an upscale version of a P5 offense that I wouldn't say is as crazy hyper passing like Western Kentucky, but it's definitely in the same mindset as far as targeting wide receivers and spreading it out. So this is probably as good as it's going to get for Austin Reed as far as at the P5 level. I'm just glad things are shaking out this way. Let's just hope he does that. I also like the NC State thing. I think that'd be very interesting, especially in an Anae offense. So, but I like the Louisville fit. I think him and Brohm are going to make some magic together this year. So we'll see.
So before he entered the portal, a lot of us were considering Reed to be a first-round pick for next year. I think we all agree that if he goes to Louisville, that it'll salvage his value somewhat. To what degree, though? I personally think that this makes him about a third-round pick going into next year. Obviously, I'd have to see who stays, who goes, and everything like that. But that's just kind of how the feel I have comparing him to quarterbacks last year. Like thinking about how QBs were valued last year. Do you guys kind of agree with that, or would you go a little lower?
So Birding the Red Shirt, we did this mock 2023 draft, and funny enough, he was like, I think he was the second pick.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. We did the conversation on the podcast 10 days after we actually did the draft. And I think you're right. I think he's now closer to second to third round, right? Like Cunningham was right on that edge of first and second rounds, insane upside. Best ball, he was an incredible quarterback because he could go for 70 on any given day, right? I think he's closer to like a Sam Hartman, a Will Rogers last year than he is a Malik Cunningham, just because he isn't that insane runner. Aiden O'Connell was really, really pretty good when healthy this past year, and he wasn't drafted anywhere near it. But I think if he had better receivers and more consistent production from guys like that you could maybe push him closer to the beginning of the second round. But I would only feel comfortable maybe end of second, early third, because he does have arm talent. He does have versatility on the ground, good coaching staff to help him out, which are all key parts of that.
Yeah, Brandon, real quick.
Yeah, I was going to think the bottom second, early third. We got to just see because his value will probably go up depending on what we see as far as transfers coming in and stuff like that. If we get
Fair
a
enough.
really solid wide receiver, or if we get, they got decent running backs there, and I know they lost Reuben Owens and the other two are out, but we still got Jordan there. There might be another running back that's rumored to go to Louisville too. So, if they get the right pieces, I might be up to maybe go mid-second. Maybe he'll start climbing to the beginning of the second, but we have to wait for that to hit. But for right now, with just what we're seeing on paper and stuff like that, I'd probably say it'd be safe to go to the top of the third for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to our second quarterback here. We'll go through these probably just a little bit quicker, but we'll keep it going regardless. Of course, we're going to talk about DJ Uiagaleilei, the 5-star quarterback at Clemson. Doesn't really look like a 5-star anymore, but he was the QB 20 in CFF this past year. Very surprisingly productive year for him. They let him run a ton, which helped him out on that level, let him get into the end zone several times. It's pretty much consensus that DJ is probably heading back out west where he is from originally. He is a Cali boy. And UCLA currently is the betting favorite, but there are definitely some other options out there. Chris Hummer has said that Oregon State will be in the mix for him. And then a lot of people have speculated that DJ's younger brother, Mateo Uiagaleilei, who is a stud football player in his own right, is probably going to head to one of 3 schools, whether that be Oregon, USC, or Ohio State. And a lot of people have speculated that these two will be a package deal together. If that is the case, Oregon seems like a spot where DJ, I think, could probably head over to. We've already seen that staff rehabilitate Bo Nix's stock last year. I doubt Bo Nix comes back with Kenny Dillingham moving on to Arizona State. Or at least I would be shocked if he came back. If Bo Nix does move on, I think it makes a lot of sense for Uiagaleilei to head over there. They got a really good offensive coordinator hire in the guy from UTSA. I forget his name off the top of my head. I should remember these things better. But, of course, a lot of us have speculated UCLA being our favorite option out of the bunch because we've seen what DTR has done in that Chip Kelly system the past couple of years. Why not let Uiagaleilei rehabilitate himself a little bit there against some Pac-12 defenses? Brandon, your thoughts on the matter, and where would you pick DJ to go if you had to pick today?
So one, I was super shocked to see the QB 20. That goes to show you the power of the ACC and the little defense. So if he's going to move, he definitely needs a change of scenery. He just needs to get away, wipe the orange off the helmet, and completely just reestablish him somewhere else. And I think the Pac-12 is a good spot for him, man, whether that's UCLA or it's Oregon. UCLA has been shown. Gabriel almost went to UCLA before the spot in Oklahoma opened up. So UCLA is not afraid to grab a guy out of the portal and try to, steer the ship there. Even when DTR was there last year, they were trying to look for Gabriel. So I think a good spot would be there. But honestly, I would love Oregon. I hope Nix declares. I think Nix proved himself. The naked bow standards there with DFS. He was a king, and he's Chris's boy. So maybe DJ, you might be Chris's new boy. I don't know. We'll have to get some thoughts there.
All season, but more for like reliability purposes, just because he was going to play a bunch. I think the consensus is he has to go West Coast. I think that makes the most sense for him. I don't know if he fits Oregon as much as people think. Like Bo Nix ran for 6 yards a carry. Like he moves. He's not a slow dude. And DJU is more big and in a runner is more than he is Bo Nix is pretty small. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he comes back. But let's say he leaves. I don't think that DJU is the replacement personally. So we'll see what happens with it. I think UCLA makes a ton of sense. I think Oregon State, like you said, Jared, with Chris Hummer saying they'd be in the mix. Like Oregon State's making moves. They got some players on offense. Like
they really are quarterback away. Yeah,
it makes complete sense from that standpoint. So I don't know if it's a comparable 1-to-1. Dillingham's gone as well. That changes things for Oregon. So we'll see what happens. I think as long as he goes West Coast, he'll be fine. What about Arizona State, right? Like, he's a better version of Emory Jones. To me, right? Emory Jones is gone, right? I think that offense would really be pretty good with the DJU at quarterback. And in the Pac-12, everything is up for grabs. It's like an ACC light in a sense where nobody plays defense. just yards everywhere. So I think that's where consensus, West Coast for sure, just matter of which one.
Yeah, I love the Arizona State call out there. I think that would be another great landing spot for him. Moving on to our third quarterback here, we got to talk about Mr. Spencer Sanders, quarterback out of Oklahoma State, the QB 36 in CFF this past year. At one point was the number one quarterback in CFF. Then injury started to catch up a little bit. Oklahoma State not performing well the rest of the season there. Betting favorites, according to bookies.com, says that Florida actually is the number one place that they would say for him to go. I don't necessarily know about that, but they also have Notre Dame and Wisconsin there. I think any one of those three makes sense. All three of them looking for places for him to go. He could move down a level to the G5 maybe. I'm also going to throw this one out here. I have no basis that this is actually happening whatsoever, but I'm just going to throw it out into the ether just to scare a bunch of people about their Drew Aller shares. Mike Yurich was his primary recruiter at Oklahoma State, and he is currently the offensive coordinator at Penn State. So maybe they bring that connection back up. Maybe they don't think Drew Aller's ready, and they ride 1 year Spencer Sanders over there. Again, no basis in terms of that's actually happening. I just found that out, and I was like, you know what? That could be a really, really funny thing to make a bunch of people freak out. So, Kay, what are your thoughts on Spencer Sanders, and where do you think he'll end up going?
This feels pretty boring out of like a guy that's been really pretty productive in his career. And he also feels like he's been here forever. So it's so hard to think of where could Spencer Sanders play? Like what actual other uniform would make sense on him? I don't hate the Penn State call at all. I just think they'd be, I think recruits would see that negatively, but I think from a perspective of fit, that's a pretty good one. I think Wisconsin's probably the best fit. Luke Fickell's there now, right?
Yes, sir.
He kind of feels like a Ritter-esque type, right? He's mobile, he's agile, he can run around a little bit. I don't know. It's just really a tough situation to imagine him in another uniform. My bet would say Wisconsin. Being in Oklahoma his whole career, like, does Florida make sense? Not to me, no. And then like Notre Dame, I think they want a true passer.
Okay.
So that's why I lean Wisconsin of the bunch, but it's really, I'll be probably shocked at wherever he ends up going.
All right, Brandon, what are your thoughts real quick, sir?
Yeah, so one, we need Ethan and Collin to calm down. It was just a synopsis. We're just throwing Penn State out into the ether. That's all we're doing, guys. So just calm down a little bit. But I'm for me, it's Wisconsin. I think especially Fickell and with Longo coming in, a guy that knows Longo's system pretty well. I think Sanders can fit right into that mold. That would be great for guys like Chimer DK and I think the freshman Bell. As far as their wide receivers, that would be good for them coming back, as well as some possible transfer portals and the recruiting that's going on in Wisconsin. I feel like the old days of just Braylon Allen only is done. And I think we're going to see a lot more of a thing. And the thing with Longo is like he knows how to play his running backs well. So don't look at Braylon Allen as like he's toast or anything like that. He's going to get production because he's, Longo's system's proven that if you have a one featured back, he's going to use it till the wheels fall off or they get injured and it's on to the next one, basically. So as you can see, shout out Elijah Green. But, as far as, Spencer, I think this is a great fit for Wisconsin. I don't think Notre Dame. I think that's a Devin Leary fit. I'm just liking Leary a little bit more, and we'll talk about him possibly coming up soon. But I like Notre Dame and Leary a little bit more. So I think Spencer Sanders and Wisconsin's a great bridge until they find their next guy to carry the torch.
All righty. Let's move on to our fourth quarterback here. We're going to talk about Collin Schlee. And those of you listening, just letting you know, this is going to be a long podcast. I hope you guys are buckled in. Collin Schlee, quarterback out of Kent State, heading out of there. Makes sense. His head coach, Sean Lewis, who's built that offensive system, is out of there. We'll talk about several other Kent State players who are also in the portal here today. So Nate Marquise threw Collin Schlee out as a wild card potential, very low chance he enters the portal. I don't think Nate saw Sean Lewis leaving Kent State coming, especially for an OC job. The natural thought is that okay, you just follow Sean Lewis to wherever he went. Well, again, Shedeur Sanders is going to be the starting quarterback for Colorado next year. That's pretty much a done deal. Nate mentioned Cincinnati and Maryland in his article as potential landing spots. Washington made a lot of sense in my opinion until Penix decided to return. Collin Schlee's primary recruiter when he was getting recruited to Indiana is now at Washington. So I thought there might have been a connection there. But again, with Penix coming back, not really much of an open job there for Schlee. I am of the opinion that I personally think he's going to stay in the MAC. I couldn't tell you what school. There's kind of it's almost like with a lot of those MAC schools that you can almost kind of plug in any of these guys. I think any MAC school that's looking for a quarterback with starting experience will probably go and try to nab him as well. I personally don't see him trying to move up a level if he wasn't already planning on doing that. So who's up here? Brandon, you go first. Brandon, what are your thoughts on Schlee?
So I wish nepotism in the Sanders family was not a thing, not in my personal family, but in Deion's family. So if that wasn't a thing, Collin Schlee is the perfect fit for Colorado, especially with Sean Lewis, especially with some of the receivers that's also followed Schlee to the portal. That would be amazing to see, something that we saw in the MAC get played in the Pac-12, which I think is just a little bit more of an advanced version there. So Schlee would be perfect in Colorado, but until we see something, Shedor's probably starting 100%, at least in game one, and kind of go from there. So if we don't do that, he's kind of now he's limited. So it's like, okay, who are we looking at? So I like the MAC option. I think a lot of people like DJ Irons, but I like Schlee a lot better at Akron because he's got Adams and a couple guys there that are really, really good. And they have a good offensive system at Akron. There's a couple other ones. If Gabbard didn't return to Miami of Ohio, I'd say Schlee in Ohio would have been pretty cool. There's a few options, but because of the block by the Sanders family there at Colorado, I think he had his one chance at P5, and that was going to be the ticket, especially with Sean Lewis and the familiarity. But because of that, it kind of limits his. I say he goes there. Maybe a higher G5. I looked at it like this. This is a shot in the dark too, but who's to say? The guys down the street at ECU, Hull Nailers is leaving. Basin Garcia's there. He's looking good, but Schlee, I could see him working fairly well in an ECU offense that likes to move the ball around quite a bit. So that would be my shot in the dark if he wants to do at least a higher G5. That would be kind of interesting, kind of like that AAC, something like that would be the higher tier that he could probably go possibly.
Okay, what are your thoughts, real quick?
I thought that this was super surprising to me, like Reed at Western Kentucky. I thought for a while he would go back to Kent State. I don't think he can go back, right? There's nothing left. Everybody left. So
well, he hopped in the portal after Sean Lewis was hired. So this wasn't this wasn't before Sean Lewis
makes a ton of sense for everybody to just a bolt, right? That shows the impact of the head coach there. I love the East Carolina pick. I think that's awesome. What about like a Houston pick, something like that, right? Like he's a good quarterback. He's got an arm. He can move. So I think he'd be selling himself short to stay in the MAC, but we'll see. I think he could go higher G5 and be successful. And I think East Carolina is a really random but good pick for him. I don't know if there's any allegiance that he cares about, right? Like Colorado's not an option. So
he's full free agent.
Yeah, I mean, he truly wants to go to the best situation for himself. So I think this will be an interesting spot to see where he lands.
He's definitely kind of just sitting at home, just kind of seeing what offers pour in, and then he can decide what goes from there. Moving on to our next one here, going over to Brennan Armstrong, quarterback out of Virginia, a year too late in the portal, in my opinion. Quarterback 67 on the year for CFF. Tony Elliott completely tanked this Virginia offense, much to Nate and I's prediction, and much to Chris K's sadness.
Sadness for sure.
Sadness for sure. But again, he finally learned his lesson, realized, hey, this isn't working out. I need to get out of here. So he is in the portal. A couple rumors as to where he is going. We have gotten word that West Kentucky and him have some kind of interest with each other. Maybe if that is the case, that would be a dream come true for CFF. I highly doubt it, though. I feel like there are more strong rumors associating with him following one of his former coaches, whether that be Beck or Anae, to Syracuse or NC State. Personally, I don't want either of those to happen because I have shares of Garrett Schrader and MJ Morris. Would rather he just go somewhere else and make himself his own man. But we have seen he knows this at this point. He is a system quarterback. He needs the right system to really produce the numbers that he needs. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on Brennan Armstrong, and where would you like to see him go?
I don't think he can go to the portal and then go to Western Kentucky. Like, I think from a fantasy perspective, that's amazing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, he literally feels like a left-handed version of Austin Reed. Like, literally throw Austin Reed in a mirror. That's Brennan Armstrong, right? So I think that's an awesome spot for him, but I just don't see it happening. NC State makes the most sense. I don't think Syracuse, I see the connections. I just don't know if Dino Babers can like really bench Schrader like that. Like that it just gives off bad vibes, right? In an era where we have to keep guys loyal and the Legion and things like that, that's not a good move for him. So I like the NC State pick. That would be really tough for Morris because he showed some real upside the second half of the season when he actually got to play. But I think that makes the most sense. And I think what's really interesting about him is, doesn't he have 2 more years of eligibility with the whole,
yes,
with everything that went down? Technically, he didn't lose a year, right? Like, so he should be highly sought after from those higher level G5s to the lower level Power 5s, I would say.
Especially in a kind of heavy passing attack. Like, they've seen him perform well in those systems. They know he's not going to throw his shoulder out from the sheer volume of the system. I think that he'll find his place out there somewhere. Brandon, real quick, what are your thoughts on Armstrong?
I think it's the smart bet for him to stay in the ACC. I think, especially if he's looking at draft stock and stuff like that. But we've seen it. Western Kentucky has now produced 2 quarterbacks now in the NFL. So who's to say that Western Kentucky doesn't get looked at? I mean, if anything, it elevates the strong arm of Armstrong. I've heard that Corley's there to stay. He's not really going to move. He wants to be the main producer coming out of Western Kentucky and try to surpass Stearns and those guys. So if that's the case, I would love Armstrong and Corley. That would be the tag team champions of the world to me. So, it's a far cry, and we're hoping that it is the case. But I know the percentage is kind of low. But there is talks. It is legit. So I mean, like there is talks between the two. It's just a matter of what's going to be right for Brennan Armstrong. And honestly, if I had to really deep down and search for what I think is good for him, he should probably go to NC State. If I'm being honest, as much as I like MJ Morris, Armstrong and NC State would be quite an interesting concept for sure.
Yeah, I think we all agree. If Armstrong landed somehow at Western Kentucky, easy first round CFF quarterback right there. Speaking of guys that we're super excited about, this is probably my personal the quarterback I'm most excited about in the portal right now, and that has to be Mike Wright, the quarterback over at who was at Vanderbilt. He's in the portal. Don't really know where he's going, but he really showed out for Vanderbilt, really kind of made them more relevant than they have been in the last couple of years. They seem ready to move on. They're going with their freshman quarterback, AJ Swan there. I don't blame them. AJ Swan also looked good. I think that was the best duo that Vanderbilt might have had at quarterback in its entire history. So now what happens with Mike Wright? Sky's the limit, in my opinion, in terms of what happens with Mike Wright. If he lands anywhere in the G5, like at a place where he can start and he's not going to sit behind anybody, I think he has one of the highest upsides at quarterback in the country. He's one of the fastest quarterbacks out there. He's had runs so far this past year of 44, 59, 87 yards. Dude can just absolutely take off wherever he's facing. And if he can get somewhere that's not the SEC and he can face much less tough defenses, God, I can only imagine what he could do. So, Brandon, your thoughts on Mike Wright? Again, we don't have a ton to go off of in terms of where he could go. Again, I'm just of the opinion that if he lands anywhere in the G5, it's sky's the limit. Brandon, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so shout out to Mike Wright, week 0 champion. I know he was one of our great plays there with me and Kay when we were talking week 0. There's a couple guys that we'll talk about over week 0 favorites that we enjoyed. But Mike Wright, man, put on a clinic. And Vanderbilt actually started, doing really, really well. I was stoked to see that Swan went there as far as recruiting. I thought Swan, being SEC, if he was going to be the SEC, Vanderbilt would have been the ticket for him. I think it's good for Mike Wright to get out of the SEC. Can I think he still play P5? Maybe. But he needs to go to a spot where he can be free to run because he is quite fast and he can get out of the pocket. So he definitely can get stuff done on his feet. So I guess we have to look at, some of the possible P5 ones that let that kind of happen to go along with it. Who's to say? I mean, this is a wild shot, and I don't know if it would fit, but there's people that are looking, Minnesota, Illinois, things like that. Maybe Purdue now. I don't know. Like
Brandon, you made me cry with the Illinois and Minnesota picks there. Come on, man. Come on.
I'm just trying to see.
Kill him.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be the downer. I'm just trying to say if he's trying to stay in P5, these are the schools he's probably going to have to look at. I think G5 would be the best. Who's to say if the sweepstakes for Brennan Armstrong doesn't go well for Western Kentucky, might write at Western Kentucky. Hey, let's go. You know what I'm saying? Like, that'd be fantastic because him running out, they got some good running backs that are waiting in the wing if Robichek does, in fact, transfer and stuff like that. So that would be a cool one. I think G5 is his ticket. He just needs to get out of SEC, and I'm glad he's doing that. So that's all I really got for Mike Wright currently at the moment.
Okay, real quick, your thoughts on Mike Wright?
I love the Western Kentucky pick. Who offered him from the MAC?
Who offered it from the MAC?
Bowling Green.
Oh,
let's go, dude.
So I'm just saying that's a possibility.
Oh, yes.
The perfect fit would be UCF, but
yeah,
BRP's got another year. I don't think that happens.
No, that wouldn't happen.
I'm just looking at some of these schools that offered him. It does feel like a Western Kentucky could be fun. What about a Texas State? Kenny there as the head coach at Texas State, right? From Incarnate Word.
Yeah.
That feels like a pretty good situation. That quarterback that they had, I think he set the record for most touchdowns, and he's like 5'11", 200. Like, he's not like a big dude. Like, that offense can be successful with a Mike Wright type.
True.
I don't know about the connection because he is from Atlanta, Mike Wright is. So it's not like I was hoping maybe he's from Texas or something, but I think this will be just a straight random connection. Maybe even he might go to UCF and just make us all super upset about having to wait 2 years for it. That's the kind of move that I think he could make.
Yeah. All right. Next quarterback here, we got Devin Leary, quarterback out of NC State. We kind of already touched on him a little bit earlier. Great year in 2021, not so great this year in 2022. QB 123 on the year, got hurt. Even before that point, just wasn't producing to the point that he was in 2021. Chris Humber has said that the three names that he is watching out for here are Notre Dame, Missouri, and Illinois. I checked on bookies.com, and they say that Illinois is their current betting favorite. I personally am leaning more towards Devin Leary. Feels like a Notre Dame quarterback through and through. Feels like the exact kind of guy that they want to pick up. Tyler Buchner didn't look ready when he started this year. I doubt after this injury he's going to be ready to start again this next year. They need a 1 year rental, and I think Devin Leary is that perfect guy for them. Now, do I expect him to be a CFF asset if that happens? Probably not. I feel like it'd be one of those things where you might take him in like the 20th round, kind of similar to Bo Nix is here, where it's like you might take him in the 20th round, and then all of a sudden just that offense completely surprises you, and he's just back to where he was. But overall, none of these really strike me as a guarantee that Leary will return to form between Notre Dame, Missouri, and Illinois. Chris, what are your thoughts on Leary, and do any of those places excite you?
From a CFF perspective, none of them excite me. He's just not mobile enough for me to ever get excited about a Devin Leary transfer. Notre Dame feels like the biggest, safest bet of the bunch. He's a good quarterback. He just, had a tough situation, got hurt, and just wasn't as efficient as he was, the year before in 2021. So Notre Dame feels like the perfect fit for him, the perfect style of offense for him. That would really feels like the surefire. I'd be kind of shocked if he goes elsewhere.
Brandon, your quick thoughts on Mr. Leary?
Yeah, Leary, he should probably go to Notre Dame. That's the fit. My Luther Burden shares wants Mizzou, but I know that also people are tied with Leary as far as wide receivers in the portal. They're waiting for Leary to make a decision. Once Devin makes his decision, there are some wide receivers that are looking to possibly transfer there with him. So with that could be an influx of wide receivers. So if you're hoping a guy like Burden is your guy for the next year and stuff like that, maybe that's not the case. So maybe, secretly, I still want him to go to Notre Dame. I think it's a good pivot, but we're also looking at Notre Dame that might actually be really great in the passing attack come next year. I know they're probably hunting another tight end. I don't know. The next one behind Mayer looks pretty strong, so I think he might just be the next man up, but we might need to be looking at him next season as far as a guy we need to look at possibly. So Notre Dame's the ticket for me. I think Leary is a good fit for them, and I think Freeman can use him very well.
Yep, and with all of us consensusing on Notre Dame there, he's absolutely ready to go to like Oregon State or something. One last quarterback we'll kind of dive in depth here. This is the only quarterback we have today that actually has picked a location, so we can talk about CFF impact here. That is quarterback Jacolby Criswell, one of my favorite quarterbacks going into the portal. I pretty much thought he could start anywhere he could go in the country, and of course he picked the one place that he probably couldn't start because we already know that their starting quarterback will be returning next year. Jacolby Criswell is transferring over to Arkansas. KJ Jefferson has already announced that he will be coming back next year, so you're probably looking at Criswell sitting behind Jefferson at least to start the year. Again, I don't think it's outside the question that maybe Criswell overtakes Jefferson if Jefferson falters a little bit more throughout the season. But overall, I think this is definitely one of those you were hoping that he would get some immediate playing time out of this transfer, and we're probably going to have to wait another year here for Criswell. So if you're holding on to him in Dynasty, continue to hold on to him. Brandon, what are your thoughts, sir?
All right, I'm saving a little intel for this podcast, so I hope you're ready. Straight out of Chapel Hill, are you ready? So basically, Criswell, of course, was Arkansas, so it was a natural connection, right? He was going to be the heir apparent to Sam Howell, and then Drake May decommitted from Alabama, came to North Carolina. The rest has been written in history so far, right? So Criswell wanting to go back home. He's been wanting to go back home probably since the season, but they gave him a legit chance to go up against Drake. Drake just happened to win, but barely. This was a tight race. I saw it with my own eyes in the spring. You guys were following it closely in the offseason, all the way up to week one when they were playing or whatever. So Criswell, knowing that he wants to go back home, Arkansas was the fit. Like he was, when he was there, like if he got any play time, he was basically trying out for Arkansas. There really wasn't going to be an Arkansas State or anything like that. He was going to stay in P5. So he committed. And from what I'm hearing, when he chose to, that he's been told by Pittman that he will get a legit chance to compete against KJ Jefferson. That there's not, I'm saying there's a controversy. I'm not saying that KJ won't start. I'm just saying there will be a legitimate chance that Criswell will go head to head against KJ, and the best man will win the job at Arkansas. So keep your shares. I think it's possible that even if he doesn't, if KJ goes down with injury, God forbid, we don't want any injuries happening. But if KJ doesn't, or he struggles in the summertime, and Criswell has been known to pick up a playbook and learn it very quickly, we could see a possible change of the guard in Arkansas with 2 years left with Criswell. So hold on to him. I think it's worth it to stash him. And I don't know if you should be completely concerned about KJ just yet until we see something in the springtime. So that's what I got so far.
All righty. Gotta love to hear that. Kay, what are your quick thoughts on Criswell?
He's not young. This is his fourth year. So this is such an interesting pick, right? Like if he wants to go to the NFL in the future, why not just find a place where he's guaranteed, right? He's supposed to be talented. Why does he not just pick a place where he can play? I legitimately believe what you're saying, Brandon, that he has a legitimate shot at winning the gig. I could 100% see KJ Jefferson transferring in that like spring portal window for sure. But it's just weird, man. He's a fourth-year guy that is going to be technically on his second year of eligibility next year. It's super interesting because of COVID, and then I think he redshirted, right? So like this will be really interesting career-wise. But I don't think it's the best move for him. Besides maybe just being homesick / just wants to be around family, which, by the way, absolutely nothing wrong with him.
No, absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Alrighty, let's go ahead and move on to a couple quick honorable mentions I want to run through here with quarterbacks. Again, this is going to be a long podcast. Sorry for all of y'all listening. Go take a break, go grab some water, go to the bathroom real quick, and then come back to us here in a second. But first, we'll touch on some quarterbacks here. Donovan Smith, quarterback out of Texas Tech, he is transferring out. A lot of people expecting that maybe he follows his old coach over to Louisiana Tech. That'd be interesting. In addition to that, we also have Malik Hornsby, the backup quarterback out of Arkansas. He is heading out of Arkansas again. Hudson Card, quarterback out of Texas. Not a ton of news as to where he could possibly go. Nick Evers, the 4-star quarterback out of Oklahoma, freshman, he is out of there. That just didn't work out over there. I think he's still got plenty enough talent to where he can be an interesting guy if he were to land somewhere. And then last but not least, we got Jeff Sims, the quarterback out of Georgia Tech. We all knew that he was more than likely outside the door after Gibson and Pyron basically overtook his job. He currently has a 100% prediction rate to go to Nebraska, according to On3. I think that'd be a pretty interesting fit over there with Matt Rule. We'll definitely have to see. All right, guys, we're back. We lost Kay there for a second with some rain and thunderstorms taking out his power there, but he is back. We got him back, and we're going to move on to these running backs over here, and we'll start here. Again, we talked about earlier, we're going to hit some of these Kent State guys, pretty much all of them bolting for the portal as soon as Sean Lewis heads out. And we're going to talk about, of course, their running back, Marquez Cooper. Running back 21 in CFF this year. Absolute killer year for him. Probably would have even been better if Kent State didn't play the murderer's row of Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia to keep down his production for the most part. So a lot of people would have expected Marquez Cooper to head out and go follow Sean Lewis, maybe over to Colorado, but that's not what we are seeing really with the crystal balls that we're seeing over at On3. Currently, the number one option for him, according to On3, is actually Toledo. He looks like he is staying in the MAC, at least according to these crystal balls. 38.1% chance there. Ball State not super far behind him in the low 30% there as well. I think either one of those, I would love to see Marquez Cooper head over to. I think he'll kill it at either one. But Chris, your thoughts on Marquez Cooper and the potential for him next year?
I think Mac makes the most sense, right? Like, he's undersized, although he's a smaller guy, but he's pretty thick for his size. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. He's not going to replace Chase Brown, right? Like, he's not going to get 300 carries and survive. Colorado would have been fun, but I don't think Colorado needs to settle.
Also, you say real quick, you say he couldn't get 300 carries and survive. He had 285 this past year.
Yeah, well, those extra 15, Jared.
Oh yeah, you're right.
The wear and tear.
It's great. I said it, and I was like, "Oh man, Jared's going to call me on this," and rightfully so. I just don't see him in the Big Ten doing that.
No.
I think the MAC makes the most sense. I mean, we saw what happens. We have seen what's happened at Ball State when you give a guy a bunch of carries that's somewhat talented with Carson Steele. So I think Toledo would be a great spot. Bryant Kobach was awesome for them. Absolutely. So, I think there's a lot of options. If he goes anywhere outside of the MAC, his value goes down tremendously, is all I know for sure.
I agree 100%. Brandon, your thoughts on Marquez Cooper real quick.
I like both, but I'm praying for Ball State, man, because what we saw about another guy we're about to talk about here shortly, if they're just going to feed the running back, Marquez Cooper can handle the load in the MAC. I agree. Maybe not the Big Ten, but MAC, this is Marquez Cooper's playground, and everyone else is just playing in it, basically. So if Cooper can go to Ball State, that's what I'm really hoping for, but I think Toledo would be a good fit. And then we wouldn't have to really worry about guessing which running back from Toledo that we want to pick anymore. We can just go with Marquez Cooper. So, hey, it's a win-win either way, and I'm down.
Yeah, what a mess that was last year. And then Jarquez Stewart, of course. Next running back we'll talk about here, we're going to talk about Mr. Blake Watson, running back out of Old Dominion, RB42 this past year for CFF. Not a ton of information here regarding where he could be ending up, although On3 does have him labeled as their top running back choice for their rankings so far. I think that speaks more to overall this running back class in the transfer portal just isn't as strong as we've seen in past couple of years. Definitely not as much higher names entering in. That could change over the next couple of weeks. But regardless, Brandon, what are your thoughts on Blake Watson? My goodness, what my voice there. What are your thoughts on Blake Watson? And do you have any kind of random schools you want to throw out there into the ether as to where he could go that me and Kay will love?
No, I probably should have hit up Justice and be like, hey, man, what are you thinking, man? If he's going to get out of here, where's he going?
I already tried. He said he has no clue.
Justice is paying attention to the defense anyway, so it's all good. All right, so Blake Watson, he's he's another free agent, just like Mike Wright. He could really go anywhere, and it could be our worst nightmare, or it could be a solid fit. I'm liking AAC. I think that would be a good spot for a couple places, possibly. I don't have a specific school. I think I'd probably volley this over to Kay and see if he's got any fits or anything like that. But I think
I got one. Brandon.
I'm interested. Go.
NC State. Doesn't NC State feel like a great fit? He's a better version of Jordan Houston to me, right? Like he's a great runner. He's good in the passing game. That feels like a good fit. Would be awesome for CFF standpoint. It stays on the East Coast. Like anytime I see like an ODU transfer, ECU transfer, I think like, okay, who are the bigger East Coast schools that could fit? Like a lot of times I'm thinking Virginia Tech because that's obviously where I went. So I'm like, well, we don't need running back. We need a receiver. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But NC State has to get a running back, in my opinion. I said that already. And I think Blake Watson would be an incredible addition. He gets to play in a big-time program. He's earned it, and he's a great fit for that offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I love that call a lot. Again, Brandon, I think you agree that would be a ton of fun. I don't know how much that would be for CFF. Now, again, because with Robert Anae, we saw him do well with Sean Tucker this past year. I think he could do well with Blake Watson in the passing game as well. Blake Watson's shown an ability to catch out of the backfield pretty well. So yeah, I think that's a very nice fit right there. Now, of course, again, that's just us throwing it out in the ether. We don't know that that's where he's going to go, or no indication whatsoever. He could end up going to Texas A&M Commerce for all we know. So next up here, another MAC running back. Several of these to talk about, but we got Sean Tyler, the running back out of Western Michigan. Makes sense. His coach was let go. They bring in Lance Taylor. He was a 1,000-yard running back this past year, RB50 for CFF. Western Michigan, not quite the offensive powerhouse we've kind of been used to seeing them as recently. I personally think that this is a case of a portal dipper. I think that Sean Tyler ends up withdrawing and going back to Western Michigan. I think Lance Taylor, being a running backs-oriented coach, will make that a bit more appealing because Sean Tyler entered the portal after his head coach was fired, and then you had Lance Taylor get hired afterwards. I'm curious to see if Lance Taylor does a good job at retaining Sean Tyler, because I believe Ladarius Jefferson's out of eligibility, making Sean Tyler easily the number one running back for this backfield. That's just my opinion. Again, he could go elsewhere. I would like him to stay in the MAC, just like I like any of these running backs who are in the portal to stay in the MAC. But that's just kind of my personal feel on it. Kay, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. And by the way, Portal Dipper, you should copyright that because that's awesome.
I can't quite.
Somebody else.
I would say Pate kind of put that term out there. So I just
man, that was so good. I really like that. You could have sold me on it. I think he's a good college. I think he's the perfect example of a great college running back that probably has no role in the NFL. There's nothing wrong with
Zero.
that. Nothing wrong with that. I love that because that means I'm going to get 5, maybe 6 years of Sean Tyler, and I love every second of that. I see him going back to Western Michigan or staying in the MAC. If he were to go elsewhere, it'd just be a tough situation. He reminds me a lot of like a 80% version of Marquez Cooper to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Brandon, your thoughts on Tyler real quick.
I agree. It's the same thing. If I was Taylor, I'd be calling Tyler for staying him and kind of warming him up. Because wouldn't you want to be RB1 at least at one school versus being RB1A, B option somewhere else? If not, whoever loses the sweepstakes for our guy there that we talked about, Cooper, earlier, I think Tyler would be great at Ball State and or Toledo. I think that would be good options there as well. But honestly, I think just like Fickle called Braylon Allen on this first thing, I think Taylor should call Tyler and be like, hey, man, this is the best spot for you. We're running back heavy, and this is the focus, and you could get a lot of production here and get a lot of film on tape. So I like it, man. I think he should stick around.
Taylor-Tyler connection. Let's will it into existence. Next up, we got Ray Davis, running back out of Vanderbilt. This is a guy that I have been hyping up for pretty much 2 years ongoing. First year, he got injured, couldn't really play the whole year. He finally comes back for Vanderbilt this year and finishes as the RB 56 in CFF, the best finish for a Vanderbilt running back pretty much since Keyshawn Vaughn over there. And he is back in the portal. He was originally at Temple, went to Vanderbilt. Thank Vanderbilt for their time. He is a grad transfer now, and he is heavily expected by the folks over at On3 to replace Mr. Chris Rodriguez over at Kentucky. I adore that fit. I think this do I think he's as talented as Chris Rodriguez? No, but I think he fits that very similar mold that they're going to want to have in terms of like a big bruising running back. They lose Cavassier Smoke as well, so there's plenty of room in that backfield. Perfect for a guy to come in as a one-year rental for the Wildcats. They get Liam Cohen back. That offense should be humming a little bit better than it was this year. I like Ray Davis going to Kentucky quite a bit. Again, not set in stone, but On3 is pretty certain about it happening. Brandon, what are your thoughts about Mr. Ray Davis?
When I look at Ray Davis, I was like, why didn't Kentucky, offer him in the first place? He just fits perfectly in that Kentucky fit,
Because they had Chris Rodriguez, that's why.
Well, yeah, but I was like, why not have his duplicate at the same time and just hammer everyone down? Will Levis isn't the guy that we
get the
think
copy
he is.
machine going.
Yeah, just copy and paste, just clone him, whatever, Spider-Man, all that good stuff. But basic, the Clone Wars. Anyway, it also is like Star Wars. Anyway, don't worry about it. So Ray Davis, if he's going to upgrade, stay in the SEC, go to UK, man. This is perfect, man. Like, if this is literally just cloning. Shout out to Matt Bruning for touting Ray Davis there, Roman Davis, whichever one he wants to go by. I think he's Ray Davis this week. So Ray Davis would be the good one to go. I love Kentucky. I think it's a great fit. Stays in the SEC, and I think this is going to improve some draft stock coming next year as well. So I love it.
Okay, your thoughts on Mr. Ray Davis?
I think Kentucky's a perfect fit. He's a little bit shorter, a little bit lighter than Rodriguez, but like super thick. Like he plays and looks bigger than the numbers that I just looked up online. So I think it's a great fit. Makes a lot of sense for him as an athlete to try to get himself into the pros. So I think Kentucky's the no doubter.
Yeah. All right, moving on here. We're going to talk about Mr. Aidan Robbins, running back out of UNLV. This was definitely one of those, when I saw the news that he had entered the portal, I was just like, no, why? Stay where you were. I liked where you were. He was the RP60 in CFF this past year. He's back in the portal. Chris, you have some thoughts on a place where he could go, and I kind of agree with you that this is a spot we need to be looking for a transfer running back, as much as I do like the backup option they have there. Okay, what are your thoughts on Aidan Robbins and where he might go?
I mean, the dude is huge. He's like 6'3", 230. So I don't know if you're going to find too much of like a perfect fit for like that style of running back. But I think UCLA needs a running back, and I think that makes a ton of sense, right? UNLV runs a bunch. It's like UNLV is kind of like a garbage, trashy version of UCLA, right? Like some talented receivers, quality, very versatile quarterback, and then a really talented running back, right? So him going to UCLA makes a lot of sense. With Chip Kelly would be fun. I think that helps everybody in every facet. Robbins, CFF owners, UCLA fans. So I think UCLA is where I would lean the most. Super random thought that I just had, Minnesota. I mean, he could just get like 30 carries a game. Yep. He has the body to do it. So I think UCLA to me makes the most sense, but I think Minnesota also would be a fun spot for him.
Of course, this is assuming he is trying to move back up to pure Power 5 rather than just a higher G5. But I'm not going to argue with you. Brandon, your thoughts on Mr. Robbins real quick.
Well, for my boy, the real Zach Evans, I'm hoping that's not the case. However, that is a great fit. I can't deny that. Okay, I think that was pretty spot on there. I love UCLA. Like, look at Charbonnet. Look how much of a beast that man is and how he just plows through the Pac-12. Aidan Robbins, he reminds me of like how Derrick Henry just towers over everybody. I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry, but he's like poor man's version of Derrick Henry, if that makes sense. Like once he gets downhill, it's just hard to stop Aidan Robbins. The dude's just going to plunder. He smashed there in week 0, proven, put himself on the market there. And I got to give it to K. K was on Robbins like literally day 1, and then the optimizer and everything. Like he's the guy that we picked in week 0 to go off, and he did. So I love the UCLA pick. I think that's my personal favorite. But I do agree Minnesota would be okay. I just, don't want it for my boys. But we'll see how it goes.
Alrighty, one last running back we'll get into in depth here. We're not going to spend too much time on him because we kind of talked about him a little bit just last week. But we're going to touch on Carson Steele here again, the running back out of Ball State. He was the RB5 in CFF. We're all very concerned about the fact that there's no way he's going to keep up that value wherever he lands. But we did a little bit of talking back and forth throughout the week and everything, and we think that there are some spots that he could end up. And okay, not to step on your toes here, but just for time's sake and everything, I'll go ahead and mention your thoughts here about him going to a lower 10 Big Ten school, or a lower tier Big Ten school. Illinois, Indiana, and Purdue were the 3 that you put up there. I agree with all 3 of them. I honestly put out there 2 more that I thought, because you and I are syncing on this one. I put out Northwestern and Minnesota. I think any of those 5, and you get back a ton of the value that we think that we lose here with him going off to the Power 5, so long as he actually wins the starting job for those Power 5 programs, which I have to imagine he does not enter this portal unless he thinks that he has a shot at those. Brandon, your quick thoughts on Carson Steele, and then we will move on to the honorable mentions at running back.
Yeah, I agree. I think he needs to target the lower tier of the P5, and especially the Big Ten. Personally, I would love Illinois. I think he would be a great Chase Brown replacement. I love the fit there, as well as Minnesota. I got to say it again as well. That would be fantastic. It just looks like that guy like Mo Ibrahim. Who's going to stop that guy? You know what I'm saying? He's just going to be death taxes and touchdowns. That's pretty much what's going to be Carson Steele if he goes to. I also do love the Northwestern pick with Evan Hull leaving on that one. That leaves, a nice spot. I think Carson Steele reminds me a lot of Evan Hull, and as far as the differences as far as how they match up. I like that a little bit. So 83, my personal choice would be Illinois. I think that would be his the best for his NFL draft stock, but I think it would be decent for CFF. Not a first rounder, but he definitely could be a good, maybe late second, early third, possibly, second round pick for sure.
Any quick thoughts you have, Kay?
No, I think the Big Ten makes the most sense. Why are you going in the portal as a super productive guy unless you're going to try to do something up? So I think the Big Ten makes the most sense. Northwestern is the one I would be scared of. I know Hull was super productive, but I don't really want to bet on a super lame offense to repeat, but I do see why people think that could be beneficial. And then I think Purdue would be a little bit more niche in terms of production, but
we'd have to see who Purdue hires as head coach.
Yeah. So I think all 5 of the schools mentioned, the Big Ten would be okay, but it's not going to get better than Ball State for CFF.
No, God,
so
no.
That's the bummer, right? You stay where you're at and you're a top 10 running back. We did our mock draft and I think he was a second rounder. So yeah. For the mock draft for 2023. So that just shows you how valuable of an asset he was at Ball State, and he's going to lose value, but props to him for leveling up.
Yeah, no problem with that whatsoever. Take advantage of a great season. Go through a couple of quick honorable mentions here, and then Kay and Brandon, I'll give you guys a chance to touch on any of these if you think that it's worth talking about. Titus Swen, running back out of Wyoming, got dismissed from the team. He's in the portal. Personally, I try to avoid guys who have been dismissed from teams. He's from Texas, so there's definitely some Texas schools like Texas State now with Kinney over there. Maybe they take a shot at him out of the portal. We'll see. Harrison Whaley, the running back out of NIU, clearing up that backfield at NIU just a little bit. He was the RB80 in CFF this past year. Heavily predicted by On3 right now to go to Wyoming. I think a lot of us would really, really like that spot. Replacement for Titus Swen over there. However, that offense still stinks. So how much can you really be excited about? Dominic Richardson, running back at Oklahoma State, part of the Oklahoma State exodus right now. RB87 this past year. I'll be real, as much as I touted him this year, I don't really care where he ends up going, he was terrible efficiency-wise, and he was heavily touchdown dependent. I don't want to rely on that wherever he goes. It seems like when I did some research, South Carolina beat writers on 247 seemed to be interested in him more than anybody else. So maybe that's kind of an indication that maybe South Carolina is showing some interest there. Regardless, I don't really care. Dillon Johnson, running back at Mississippi State, the infamous post there with him basically saying that Mike Leach says I'm not tough and he wanted me gone anyway. Absolute legend for that. RB 108 in CFF 2022. I don't expect him to be anything really next year. I personally predict him to go to Ole Miss. There is a lot of buzz right now that a lot of these guys who are leaving from Mississippi State are planning on going to Ole Miss in order to stick it directly to Mike Leach and Mississippi State as a school. They're not happy over there right now. And then last for this page, Trayvon Cooley, running back out of Louisville. 2 offers so far, NC State and Pittsburgh. Those are the 2 that he has posted. Either one of those are fine. I don't think either one of those are ones that get you really hopping up out of your seat, especially since we know that both those schools are likely offering other running backs as well. So none of them are really saying like, hey, you're our guy, come to us. Brandon or Chris, these 5 guys real quick on the screen here. Either one, any of them strike you as like you have to say something real quick?
For me, Whaley, just because I was a Whaley believer, got him, as a freshman, got injured, still kept him. Everyone was debating Antonio Brown. I said nay to Antonio Brown. I said, I'm the Whaley guy. I stuck with him. And so he's going to Wyoming. Yeah, Wyoming sucks. But at the same time, like the production, he's just going to get fed. So, I'm all for that. He's going to be an easy like RB2 or a flex play for me like every single week in Dynasty. So I'm down for that. Richardson, don't care. Like Cooley at NC State, but also I think that's a good fit. I know the ones we talked about would probably be even a better fit, but I dig that. And then Dillon Johnson, if he goes to Ole Miss, I think Quinshot's got that wrapped up pretty quickly. But Johnson would be a great reliever if Judkins needs a couple rests. I think that shores up the backfield for Mississippi, so that's cool. So that's what I got for this round.
Okay,
I think Whaley to Wyoming makes a ton of sense. It's almost like a 1-for-1 swap there, which will be interesting for CFF. Titus Swen's from essentially Fort Worth, like right where TCU is. Kendra Miller is going to be gone. Emery DeMercado is going to be gone. I could see him going to TCU and thinking that this is going to be the deal. Who knows what he did, right?
Yes.
Like, there's so much going on. I don't know how much I believe out of Wyoming stuff when it comes down to it because every single relevant player left last year. Levi Williams left to go be a quarterback 3 at Utah State. So or QB2 at Utah State. So that tells you something about Wyoming. So all the other running backs are, Dillon Johnson is a name because of Mississippi State. I do think Ole Miss makes a ton of sense just because of the stick it to them type situation. But all these other guys are kind of whatever. I think the running back group is fairly weak, although we do have some high-end names. I think Carson Steele, Ray Davis, Robbins, Watson are like the key guys, and everybody else is kind of like irrelevant in terms of making major waves in the CFB world, at least.
Yeah. A couple more honorable mentions here at running back. Jalen Mitchell, the running back out of Louisville, both him and Cooley on their way out. On 3 has him predicted to go to Akron. Even if he does go there, I still would ride my Clyde Price shares there. I don't think anybody's taking that job away from him. Kobe Pace, running back out of Clemson, kind of fell to 3rd on the depth chart over there. Some talk from Chris Dokish, a former Pittsburgh writer, saying that there is some mutual interest between Kobe Pace and Pittsburgh. So if Abanikanda moves on and Rodney Hammond is maybe he moves on as well for some reason, that could be something kind of interesting there. I'm not super high on it. Jalen Knighton, the running back out of Miami, just announced today that he is transferring from Miami to SMU. Just another body to clutter up the backfield over there and make us all concerned about Kamar Wheaton for another year. And then last but not least, Arlen Harris, the true freshman running back out of Stanford. I believe he's a 4-star. Transfers out of there. He is headed over to Iowa State to make all of us with Cartavius Norton shares sweat just a little bit more. I personally think Norton will be fine, but I'm not thinking too much about that. Boys, either any of these 4 players get you super excited?
No.
Not a
That's
whole
fine.
lot. Maybe Kobe Pace if he goes to Pittsburgh, but they're still Hammond, so
Exactly.
maybe.
No.
The other ones, no. Don't they still? Is Wiley gone from Akron, or is he still there?
I
Wiley.
believe Wiley's still there.
Okay, so that just clutters things up again.
Yeah.
So probably Pace out of all this. Harris is just going to be back up to Norton. Shout out to Lloyd Cartavius. He's the man.
Alrighty, let's go over to these wide receivers. This is where a ton of fun can be talked about here because there's a lot of information as to where some of these guys could be going. First of up, we'll talk about Mr. Devontez Walker, wide receiver out of Kent State. Once again, back here with the Kent State boys. I think this is a guy that can go anywhere in the country and probably produce very, very well. Extremely, extremely athletic. Clocked at almost 23 miles per hour. May have gotten over that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Regardless, he is one of the fastest dudes you can find out there. I think he becomes an instant weapon for whoever he lands with. Not a ton of information out there as to where he might be going. So that kind of makes me default to he could be one of the receivers that Colorado State pulls out of the portal and just follows his head coach over to Sean Lewis, or head coach Sean Lewis over to Colorado. But again, he is somebody that I think, regardless of where he goes, could be a ton of fun to work with. Chris, what are your thoughts on Devontez Walker, and where would you like to see him go?
Well, I would like to correct one thing that you said. He could go pretty much, what is there, 131 schools in college football?
Yes, sir.
I think there's one school he would go to that's realistic that would not make him a fantasy producer, and Nate would approve of this, and it is Georgia. But otherwise, I think UCLA would be great for him. They need receiver help.
Yep.
I think NC State, this is a perfect situation for him. He's from Charlotte. South Carolina, like the world is his oyster. He's super talented. He's a great receiver. He's produced. He's got game tape. So where is he going to go? It's just a matter of what he wants, right? Colorado, like you said, Jared, makes a ton of sense. So I think he could go anywhere, and it would be a great fit. I mean, there's so many different awesome options. I think Colorado makes the most sense with the head coach moving there as the OC, but I think also too, ACC types like an NC State would also be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, quick thing about the Georgia thing. It's funny that like everybody treats this as like this is a realistic thing. I have nobody of note that I know in that program has said anything about Devontez Walker coming to Georgia. I've heard more about Dante Cephas than I've heard about Devontez Walker. So I do it mostly to troll y'all. I don't think there's nothing there. You don't have to worry about that.
Well, you do a good job of it, so I commend you.
Brandon, what are your thoughts on Devontez Walker real quick?
Well, first, shame on Georgia. You should probably look into Walker and Cephas, but I'm just saying, I know no one wants to go there. I have my lad share. He's good for a flex play every once in a while, so I really don't want that wide receiver room to get a little too more cluttered than what it already is. And they're already trying to push my boy McCollum, which we'll talk about possibly down the road. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're doing okay. But Walker is from Charlotte. If they're from the state of North Carolina, they have been contacted by a certain team that's behind me. I don't know how far that will go, but we'll see. But also, there's one that I really liked, and I think Nate's going to love it, but Oklahoma, man. Him and Farouk would be fantastic. Even Dylan Gabriel, the gunslinger that he is, as long as Gabriel stays healthy, man, that would be great for that system, man. I know they got some guys like Bunkley Shelton and a few other ones, but gosh, wouldn't you love to have Walker the opposite of Farouk, or just have them get back and forth? That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
so he was P5. That's what I want.
Yeah, what a Mims replacement. If Mims goes pro, like that feels like a 1-for-1 swap.
Exactly.
So that's a great call with Oklahoma for sure, Brandon.
All right, we'll go from one Kent State receiver to another. We'll talk about Mr. Dante Cephas over here. Wide receiver 120 at CFF 2022. A lot of that had to do with injury. Otherwise, he probably would have done extremely, extremely well throughout the season. Currently crystal balled on 247 to Penn State on 3 follows this sentiment as well. Sounds like there is a ton of buzz around him landing there, wanting to play with Mr. Drew Aller. In terms of a CFF, we know Penn State can produce CFF wide receivers. Jahan Dodson absolutely killed it 2 years ago. I believe he finished as the wide receiver 6 in 2021. So we know that if they can focus in on one guy, they absolutely can produce that guy. The question is Dante Cephas that guy? I would say yes, but it seems so clear-cut that at least one of Parker Washington or Mitchell Tinsley last year were going to be guys that could be CFF relevant wide receivers, and neither one of them could really break away from the other. So I'm a little concerned here, but at the same time, I'm willing to give it a shot, but definitely a downgrade from the Sean Lewis system regardless in terms of how certain that would be. Brandon, your thoughts on Mr. Cephas?
So I like this as the next transfer up for Penn State. Like I said, it's a new regime now with Aller at the helm. So I do think they've become a little bit more pass focused, but still have two great backs that can go between Singleton and Catron. So I like this fit. I think with him and KLS Lambert Smith there, I think that's a nice pairing between the two. I expect Lambert Smith to probably emerge at first as wide receiver one, unless we hear like we heard like Tinsley where he was rooming with the quarterback and all this other good stuff. If we start hearing like Cephas is like the guy for Aller, then I'm going to move him up pretty quickly. I just think it's a new chance, and I think we should look at Penn State differently going to next year with the change in guard, because we finally get the old out and we finally get the stud that we want, the guy that we drafted in Dynasty this year and what we want to see. So I'm excited for Cephas. I think this is great for him, and this also puts him in some draft stock. And I think Cephas now coming back and being fully healthy, if he stays healthy, this is great for him and his NFL projection too. So good if you're in a C2C league too.
Okay, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great fit with Parker Washington leaving. There's an open void for targets. And who knows? I think Ethan from the Bet on C2C podcast would say, I think he's called it hero ball, which is kind of like more of a basketball term for me, but I think it's super fitting with Sean Clifford, where he does get a hero ball where he runs maybe where he shouldn't have type of thing. And with Aller at quarterback or whomever, that'll be a really interesting situation, because I think there is potential to take advantage of an offense that wants to create great receivers, but it just depends on who's actually under center. So I think that I would hope that he takes that, because it's good for everybody. Good for CFF, good for him and his draft stock, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, we'll talk about a guy that really flew under the radar, I think, for a lot of people last year for CFF, but he did finish as wide receiver 15. How about Tre Harris, wide receiver out of Louisiana Tech? He has entered the portal, and On3 currently has his number one option to be going to Mississippi State. Gross, because of how much they spread out the ball over there. Never really can get one guy consistently going the whole year. But secondary option, Ole Miss, which has seen quite a few crystal balls come in for them recently. Mississippi State's always kind of been there. Ole Miss is more of a recent trend. Other options include Indiana and Penn State. I think if Dante Cephas goes to Penn State, Tre Harris probably falls out of that. But Ole Miss or Indiana, I'm pretty interested in. We saw Cam Camper this past year for Indiana, at least when he was healthy, was a target monster for that offense. And I think Tre Harris could easily fill in that void and kind of separate himself from the rest of that wide receiver room. But Ole Miss needs to upgrade at receivers. They're losing guys like Mingo. They're losing a lot of experience in that room, and I think Tre Harris could easily fit that void right there. I like either one of those. Neither one of them strike me as like, oh, he's back to being a top 15 wide receiver in CFF kind of landing spots, but it'll be somebody that I'm definitely keeping an eye out throughout the rest of the offseason. Chris, your thoughts on Mr. Harris?
I think Ole Miss makes the most sense. They lose a ton of guys. That's a great offense to be a part of as a receiver, so it's tempting for him. I think Indiana, I don't think he would. I think he's gotten enough of love from bigger programs like an Ole Miss. I think he's got an offer from Oklahoma, which I think is a great fit for him as well.
Agreed.
Pending what like a Walker does, right? Like we talked about him a second ago. But Indiana's produced a bunch of dudes, right? Like Freifrogel was awesome. Nick Westbrook, wasn't he an Indiana guy years ago? Like, yes. There's been a bunch of random guys that have been super productive. Cam Camper is a great call out as well. So I think he'd be a good fit there. But I would hope that I would hope that he goes to Ole Miss. I can see why he'd go to Mississippi State. That would be a bummer.
That would be.
For CFF standpoint. But I think I could see him doing that.
Brandon, real quick, your thoughts on Mr. Harris?
Yeah, share the same sentiments. Please don't go to Mississippi State. If you ever listen to this Tre Harris, just don't do it. I don't like Leach. I think he's outdated. I think they need to refresh there quite a bit. I do love Ole Miss. I think that's good. They're in need of a solid wide receiver core there. I love the Indiana pick. That's probably going to be my favorite if I had to choose between the four. If they just get a decent quarterback in there to kind of keep it going, or a decent general, like a game manager, I think this is ideal for Tre Harris and his skill set to be at Indiana. So that would be my pick.
All right. Moving on to our next guy here, we got Mr. Dorian Singer, wide receiver out of Arizona. The kind of surprise out of that Arizona wide receiver room, we all saw Jacob Cowing coming, Teterai McMillan, the true freshman there. He had a really good year, but Dorian Singer really came in strong as the clear number 2 option for them. Finished as the wide receiver 24 in CFF 2022. Very much ready, it seems like, to become the number 1 somewhere, with Jacob Cowing returning for next year. But I look at his crystal balls from On3, and they've got Arizona State at 22.2%. They got Utah, they got Colorado, they got Arkansas, they got Penn State, they got Miami. And all I can think is, watching Dorian Singer this year, this is the best he's got, really? Like, I feel like, and Nate called this out early on, this felt like the moment he entered the portal that Lincoln Riley was getting involved here. They were going to bring him over to USC, especially with Jordan Addison heading off to the draft. But it looks like that these are our options. He's saying Pac-12, and I guess I like Arizona State with Kenny Dillingham over there. We saw what they did with, oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Not Dante Thornton, the other wide receiver at Oregon, Troy Franklin. We saw what they did with Troy Franklin this year. He had a really very nice year, so I can see him doing well over there at Arizona State, but I don't know. I feel like we're missing an opportunity here for him to go somewhere better. Brandon, your thoughts on Mr. Singer?
Yeah, so I was listening to a couple podcasts and then, watching our good friend Josh Payton. He's saying that Singer is probably one of the most coveted wide receivers of this whole process. Like, as soon as he hit the portal, everyone started hitting him up. So to see Arizona State, I like that, but it does depend. If DJU does come to Arizona State, I don't know how I feel about that, because DJU does like to run a bit more. Of course, this could be, like we said, a resurgence for DJU, maybe in the Arizona State, and having the guy that helped develop Bo Nix, maybe we see more of a passing attack and stuff like that. So I'm a little hesitant in Arizona State, but I like it for now. Of course, if you go to Colorado, you go with Prime. I don't know. I don't think he's got Coleman out of Jackson State to come over yet, right? He's still at Jackson State. It's just it's just Hunter that's moving over, right? The cornerback that's coming over, I believe. So Coleman's, the 5-star that was essentially went to Jackson State, they pivoted. So I'm not sure if he's injured yet or he's going too soon. But if he's the guy that's going over to Colorado, if they don't get a guy like Walker or those guys and things like that, then they need an alpha. And I think that Coleman could be that. But if Dorian Singer went to Colorado, I can guarantee you he'd probably be the wide receiver 1 in that offense pretty quickly. Just because if you can be wide receiver 2 in Pac-12, if he stays in Pac-12, he'll just immediately move, I think, to a wide receiver 1's process there. So like Colorado the best, the sneaky one, Arkansas, especially if you get KJ or Jacolby. I kind of dig that a little bit. I don't know how you guys kind of feel about that, but Singer and in an Arkansas uniform, that intrigues me a little bit.
I think it'd be fun. I just don't understand why he would go from Arizona to Arizona State. Like, what's he gaining? Like, do they have money at Arizona State?
Is he from Arizona, or is he just trying to?
He's
stay
West
local?
Coast, but like, why not just stay at Arizona? Like, again, so to me,
overall, this feels weird.
I think he stays at Arizona, or he does something real crazy. Alabama needs a receiver. Dorian Singer should be that receiver. I'm going to say that right now. I think that makes a lot of sense. He's super talented. And they need a guy. It just depends, I guess. I don't think Singer would ever think, I don't think any college player would ever think this far down the road, but like, does he actually think like, well, if Milrow's the quarterback, then they might go run heavy. If Simpson's the quarterback, then they go pass heavy. I don't think they do any of that, but that would be my only fear. As if I was Singer, that would be my fear at Alabama. But I don't know. He's a West Coast guy, it seems like. I just don't know why you would go to Arizona State from Arizona, unless you hate Arizona, like, and you want to stick it to them. But like, just go back to where you're at. You're fine. You're going to be drafted high. You got Cowing back. That offense can be awesome. Like, I just don't understand why you would go to Arizona State. Again,
that's my kind of point. It's like, it felt like the moment he entered the portal, I'm like, all right, he's looking to upgrade. Like, he's looking to be like one of those top guys in the portal. And then now I'm looking at this crystal ball list and I'm like, doesn't seem like that's happening right now.
Yeah, I'm like, where's USC in all this? Like, they should just go. You know what I'm saying? Like, if he's the top dog and wide receiver, then why aren't these bigger schools like why isn't he Crystal Ball there? That's the weird part for me.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe he entered the portal and got a world of reality spoon fed to him. Next up, Anae Jennings, the wide receiver out of Old Dominion, is quietly having a really good CFF year, was in the top 6 wide receivers at one point. Injuries affected him down the stretch, finished as the wide receiver 27. Currently on 3, has the highest percentage for him, crystal ball wise, going to Duke, 22.2%. I adore that, in my opinion, because Riley Leonard, I think, really needs a top wide receiver. I mean, Calhoun is fine, but I think Anae Jennings would really take that offense to another level there. They also got Virginia Tech up there around 20%, Louisville, Mississippi State, some of the typical ones here. Everybody's getting a crystal ball to Colorado, it feels like at this point. But Kay, your thoughts on Anae Jennings? I noticed you put down another school that doesn't have a crystal ball, but it could be interesting. What do you think?
Well, we've entered the Hokie zone of the transfer portal for the one.
Hokie zone.
But that's not the school you're talking about. I think this makes the most sense for UNC, right? Like, UNC has some talented young guys, and Brandon, you can speak to it, I'm sure. But like, Anae Jennings is awesome. The dude's incredible. He's got Drake May. You're not wasting a year on young guys. You're not like taking that chance if you're Mac Brown. Mac Brown is like 3 years away from just being in a retirement home. So like, you need to get in and get out and let's do this, right? So Jennings makes the most sense for me there. Virginia Tech's going to need a receiver. They're going to be super active in the portal, I think. So I think that would make a ton of sense, but I don't think he would. That feels like a step lower than he should go. But yeah. So what do you guys think?
Brandon?
Oh man, the rivalry thing hurts, but I love it for Riley Leonard. And CFF wise, that's where I like the Duke fit. Man, Calhoun is leaving. They need a dominant wide receiver one.
I didn't even realize Calhoun was leaving.
He is. He's finally a senior. I think that is his 5th year. So he's finally leaving. Riley Leonard, a young quarterback, now entering as I believe a sophomore, now being a junior, I want to say. This would be perfect for him in that pairing. And the way they run that offense, it was very surprising, but a good surprise. It made it a lot of fun, especially against the Duke versus Carolina and then Duke versus some of the other guys in the ACC. It was a nice, shootout type situation. And they're not terrible at defense either there at Duke. So, I like that. Virginia Tech is on the board. That's interesting. B-Tech needs some help. And then I see, of course, you got the guys. The Kansas one is very intriguing. I dig that a little bit. I will say that Anae Jennings has been contacted by other Carolina schools, and I know he's there. But we'll talk about some of the other guys that have a little bit. If you're from South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, in that area, you've probably been contacted by a UNC that's looking. I'll go ahead and tell you that they're trying desperately for Drake May to have something to where he can make a case for the NFL. They're looking for his draft stock. He's also going to help handpick the OC. So when it comes down to it, they're not looking at just these younger guys. There's some great ones like Paysor. I think he'll stick around and things like that, but they're always looking for help. We'll talk about a few guys there, but Jennings, I would love to have at UNC. I just don't know. There's a lot of smoke around that fire, if that makes sense, but he's been contacted. So I like the Duke fit. If we're going to have to, pick one right now with the side one, I like the Kansas pick as a second option. I think that'd be really sweet.
All right. Moving on to our next wide receiver here. Elijah Spencer, wide receiver 29 on the year for CFF in 2022. While all of us were going after Grant Dubose and Victor Tucker, Elijah Spencer comes out of nowhere, and he's the number one option for Charlotte pretty much throughout the entire year, at least in terms of scoring touchdowns for them. Okay, I think this is another one of those cases where this is an East Coast guy. He's probably going to land somewhere on the East Coast. Again, he's from Irmo, South Carolina. I think that the Gamecocks probably get a little bit involved here, trying to restock that receiver room a little bit. I bet Wells is out after this year. Josh Van, I know, was on his last year of eligibility, so they're going to need to restock there. I think they're people to watch out for here. But Brandon, we'll go to you first here. What do you think about Elijah Spencer, and where do you think he could land that could be CFF relevant?
I think Spencer's very talented. I think both him and DeBose, and we'll mention him as well. Both are very talented. I think they're above the level that they play at, and I think they can play, especially in the ACC, where the defense is not near as bad as they think it is. Spencer's been contacted by UNC. There's some smoke around.
It's bad.
I know, dude. My team's UNC. You know, say, look at the defense. They're all gone too. Anyway, moral of the story is you should go play. He's been contacted by UNC. I have heard some rumblings that they are fighting with. I think South Carolina is on the board. There's a few smaller options that are not in the Power Five that I think they're talking to. I think there's a couple of Conference USA ones. But you know, Spencer's been contacted. I think he would fit well. We need a guy like Spencer and Dubose on the other side, veteran guys that can help guys like Paysor, Blackwell, and the emergence of Andre Green Jr. as he's still developing and getting there, but he should be ready by next season. This would be perfect. This is what Drake May needs. He needs some veteran guys. But we'll see how it goes because there's one bigger fish there out of Georgia Tech that they're highly trying to go after first and foremost. If they get him, then that might change the decision on who they target next. But Spencer has been contacted by UNC from what I've heard out of Chapel Hill.
All right, Kay. Brandy gave me the homer pitch for Spencer to go to his home team. You gave me the homer pitch for Spencer to go to VT.
I mean, it makes he's going to be a receiver one. Grant Wells can throw a bunch. You know, who knows? I think everybody is in play for Virginia Tech. If you're on the East Coast and you're in the portal, you're in play. There's just a void of talent that is in for Blacksburg. So we'll see what happens. I think Spencer's too good for Blacksburg, to be honest. I'll be completely transparent with that. UNC feels awesome. NC State feels awesome, right? We talked about it. They need to get somebody at a receiver. Like you can't go into the next season with MJ Morris and or Armstrong or whoever with the receivers they have, considering the landscape. This isn't 10 years ago. You could do that 10 years ago, but you can't do that now because teams are stockpiling, right? So I think this is a really interesting one from an East Coast standpoint. So I think UNC makes sense. NC State makes sense. You know, Louisville, why not, right? Like, you know, it really depends. I'm curious to see if some of these quarterback moves, if Armstrong goes to NC State, does that help pull an Allie Jennings? Does that help pull an Elijah Spencer? You
Probably.
know, if Reed goes to Louisville, right? Does a Spencer say, holy shit, like that guy was awesome, right? And that's another USA guy, right? So it'll be interesting to see the impact there too. But lots of East Coast schools need players at receiver and at quarterback, and lots of spaces are open. So it'll be really fun to see some of these guys shake out.
All right, moving on to our next guy here. We got Ryan O'Keefe, wide receiver out of UCF. Wide receiver 51 on the year for CFF 2022. My personal opinion here is, first of all, I kind of liked him at UNC. Wish he didn't leave, but you know what? Let's find a place for him to go to. And he's from Texas, so my initial two thoughts are SMU and TCU. SMU losing Rashee Rice. They never really had another guy pop up behind him outside of maybe Jake Bailey for all of 5 minutes before he got injured again. I think they could bring in Ryan O'Keefe. They like to use their receivers in creative ways as well, so I think that could be fun. And speaking of using their receivers in creative ways, TCU, they're losing guys like Quentin Johnson. Darius Davis, I believe, is out after this year as well. They're not afraid of doing jet sweeps. They're not afraid of getting the ball to their receivers in creative ways. Ryan O'Keefe is perfect for those kind of plays. I think he would make a fun addition there at TCU. Chris, your thoughts real quick on Mr. O'Keefe.
I just looked on ESPN. You know, he's the identical same size as Josh Downs. 5'10", 175. I mean, like the guy is super athletic. He's agile. He's been super productive. He was great at UCF, which is not a pass-heavy offense by any means. So, you know, he's earned it. Like, this feels like the perfect one-for-one trade, right? Like, get him in there. It's the perfect replacement for a Josh Downs at UNC. Otherwise, I think he could be super successful at anywhere, right? Like, who needs receivers? Louisville would be great with a Reed maybe or whomever. You know, Colorado is knocking at everybody's door. So I think UNC makes the most sense, but I think there's some other options out there, like a Duke, right? Like, it almost needs, like, you need like one guy to go to a place for all the dominoes to fall.
Oh yeah.
And that could really impact the rest of the landscape for sure.
Brandon, real quick, 30 seconds or less on Ryan O'Keefe.
I'll be honest with you. I think O'Keefe's a little bit too big time for UNC, if I had to be honest with you. Here's my thought. Card and O'Keefe to TCU. Who says no? I like that. I think that would be a nice pairing. Both Texas guys, they don't have to go too far, and I think TCU stays in at least a playoff hunt for next year. I like O'Keefe to TCU.
All righty. Moving on to our 8th wide receiver here. We got 2 more after this that we're going to go in depth on. Let's talk about Mr. Jimmy Horn, a wide receiver out of South Florida. Very heavily considered to be one of the wide receivers going in for Deion Sanders and Colorado. Pretty much everybody started tying those two together. A lot of people said that Horn was severely underutilized by Jeff Scott and that South Florida staff. Why not go somewhere where the hype is there? Could easily come in as the best wide receiver for Colorado. Again, we'll see who else they bring in here. Again, if he's one of like 1 or 2 wide receivers that go to Colorado, I'm interested in Horn next year. I am not interested in him once they start bringing in like 3 or 4 different guys and we get the whole USC situation of the past 2 years where I see a lot of guys go in and I say, no way all these guys are going to eat. I'm just going to avoid the situation altogether. So I like Horn going to Colorado right now. We'll see how it goes in the future. Brandon, your thoughts on Horn real quick.
Yep, same sentiment. If this is one of the guys Prime gets, Sanders knows how to, elevate wide receivers and corners. This is ideal for him. The speed is fantastic in a Lewis system. So if it is just him and maybe a couple more, then they're not a bigger names like Jimmy Horn. I think this is fantastic for a supplemental if you're doing Dynasty. And of course, in redraft, that might hold some value in some later rounds until we see it elevated. So definitely like Horn at Colorado for right now, like you said.
Okay, real quick on Jimmy Horn.
I don't know if he's worth talking about too much to me.
Okay.
Like, there's so many great receivers out there. I think Colorado makes the most sense. It feels almost too written to spend too much time on it. He's a good receiver, but it feels too solidified to worry about, conjecture about who he's going to go to. But I think Colorado is the surefire favorite.
Alrighty. Moving on, Tyrese Chambers, wide receiver out of FIU, entered the portal last year. Got convinced by the new staff to come out. Hey, give us a chance. We promise we're gonna make you a star. All they did was just cut his production in half with the same number of receptions. So he said, "Screw it, I'm out of here. We're not doing this again." He was drafted as a wide receiver 25 heading into the season. Clearly, did not work out at all over there. He, unlike a lot of the guys on this list, have named a top 8 so far this year. He's got Colorado, Cincinnati, UConn, Arizona State, UCF, Toledo, Maryland, and West Virginia were named as his top ones. One thing I've started kind of keeping my eye out on for some of these transfers is which members of the media, like the sports media, are focusing on these guys the most. So he lists the top 8 there, but I noticed that when he listed that top 8 and posted on Twitter, that it was Cincinnati reporters, Colorado reporters, West Virginia reporters, and UCF media members who were the ones to comment on that. So that tells me that they're the ones who think that they have the best shot at landing him. And of those 4, I personally am kind of okay with seeing him go to any of them. Maybe not Cincinnati, but like Colorado, West Virginia, UCF. I think any of those work. UCF, again, not a pass-heavy system, but they're known to kind of focus in on one guy for a little bit there. He has a crystal ball his crystal ball says Maryland technically is the most likely, but it's 8.3%. The crystal balls are all over the place on 3 for him. I'd personally be happy with Colorado, West Virginia, or UCF. But Chris, what are your thoughts on this, and what would you be happy with?
I think Maryland makes sense, but this guy has no idea what he's doing. He was in the portal, like you said. He is out of the portal, is in it again. I don't know how much we can trust or believe in common sense with a guy like him, which is fine. He's got a lot of different schools, and I don't think there's any connection that you can tie those dots together, right? UCF makes a lot of sense to me. West Virginia, Colorado, all those are great options. He's a really good player that, as long as he doesn't go to a Cincinnati, like you kind of were mentioning, I kind of worry about a UConn maybe. But otherwise, everybody else in his top 8 are great. I think all of them would be, even a Toledo. I can't believe you put Toledo on there, man. Unless you're from Toledo, what are you doing putting Toledo on there? Come on, man. You got all these other great bigger schools and you put in Toledo on there. So no, I think he'll land at a really good spot for CFF fans, which I know Andrew P. Katz will love as well. He's a big Chambers fan. So
all right, Brandon, not to skip over you here, man, but we're going long, so I'm just going to keep it rolling here. Let's move on to the next guy here. Dominic Lovett, again, I saved him for last on the deep dives because we kind of covered him a little bit last week already, but we did get some updated information regarding which schools are most likely to get involved with him, and it looks like it is down to 3 according to Chris Hummer over at 247. That is LSU, Tennessee, and Colorado. I think you're probably looking at LSU probably being the least appetizing out of those because they just have a lot of talented receivers. They're going to spread it out quite a bit. But if some of those guys move on and he comes in and can produce, maybe. But again, Tennessee and Colorado. We talked about Jimmy Horn earlier. If he goes to Colorado, maybe he's the guy. If Lovett goes to Colorado, I feel like he has a much better chance to be the number one guy for Deion Sanders in that Sean Lewis offense over there. I would get extremely excited over Tennessee or Colorado. Brandon, your thoughts on Lovett and where he could go?
Yeah, so he's another one that's since he hit the portal, he was highly coveted. So him and Singer are considered like the 1 and 2 options there, along with O'Keefe as like a third. Lovett, wide receiver 1, did even better than our 5-star stud Luther Burden there in this first year. So he's highly coveted. Honestly, I want to see him at Tennessee with Brew. I think that would be a wonderful pairing, especially I believe Hyatt's out the door. And then, you know, our good buddy there, he got injured, the wide receiver, and he is no longer, I believe, draft eligible. So Tennessee's in need of some help, and I think Lovett would be fantastic, especially in that offense system. Brew's the big guy. Let Lovett do the guy. Let be the the shifty one that gets it done and does the bombs. I think that would be perfect for Kay's boy there, quarterback coming in, the big bazooka there. So
Bazooka
I think
Joe.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee is a great fit for him. And he would be over Brew. I'm not unrealistic here. I love Brew, but I think Lovett would immediately be receiver 1 in a great offense. That makes the most sense with Boutte coming back. I think it's just too deep of a receiver group for him to go to LSU.
Yeah, I concur with this. Cover over some honorable mentions at wide receiver here. Corey Crooms, the wide receiver out of Western Michigan. He is heading up to Minnesota. Some people hoping that he could take on the number 1 wide receiver role for the PJ Fleck offense. We've seen that pay dividends before, but Chris Bell is coming back, so little concern there. Nate McCollum, probably in my opinion, one of the best wide receivers in the portal right now. A lot of different schools are going after him. Georgia, UNC, Virginia Tech, A&M, Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Oregon. I can verify all of those schools are involved with Nate McCollum. Georgia and UNC have been the ones I have heard the most, but this is an NIL battle, so it doesn't really matter if a school comes in late, so long as they have the paycheck. Next up, we got JoJo Earl, the wide receiver out of Alabama. One of my favorites heading into the season, but he is now out. Lots of smoke from Cover 3 and 247 that TCU is heavily involved here, and he could end up there. I would adore him heading over to Sean Dykes and them. We talked about one Charlotte wide receiver, Grant DuBose, also in the portal. UNC might be a little bit interested here, but I'm not really much to say there. Dante Thornton, the wide receiver out of Oregon, heavily predicted to go to Auburn. Auburn will be grabbing a lot of these guys out of the portal. I know for a fact they're gearing up for a lot of offensive weapons right now. We'll get to the tight ends here in a minute. They're definitely trying to grab one of them out of the portal right now. Kay or Brandon, either one of you have quick thoughts on any of these 5?
It's a deep group. I think all these guys in the right spot could be super productive. Thornton to Auburn is interesting because I think Auburn's just so thin that anybody could come in there and be receiver 1. So I think it just really depends. All these guys have talent. Just where are you going? I think Crooms at Minnesota makes a lot of sense, but Altman Bell's back, so that's a little bit tough. But I think this is a super deep group, so it's been fun to watch.
Yep. Brandon, you have anything, or can we move on?
Yep, just real quick. Nate McCollum's the guy, the target 1 for UNC at wide receiver. He's been heavily favored. Of course, this is a battle between Georgia, and then I hear Georgia Tech maybe still might be in there. I grabbed McCollum and Pyram late and some dynasty as far as like a stash, thinking that would be a nice pairing of the both. but that would be quite the upgrade to go McCollum to Drake May. So I think that would be the way to go. If Georgia does it, then hey, good for Nate McCollum. I'm glad he got his money, but rest in peace to a CFF value. I'm still going to pick Ladd McConkey and go with that. JoJo Earl to TCU would be fantastic. DuBose is being pursued by UNC. There is smoke behind that. DuBose and Spencer are the guys behind McCollum that they're very interested in. Like I said, if you're closer to the East Coast, they're looking at you. But I do like Earl, TCU, McCollum. That'd be great to have him. Crimson, Minnesota. Minnesota's been proven to have two wide receivers at one time as far as Bateman and Johnson. So let's see that reemergence. I would love to see that happen between Bell and Corey Crooms, whether it's wide receiver 1 or 2 or 1A and 1B. I like that.
Alrighty. Moving on to the second set of honorable mentions at wide receiver here. DeAndre McCray, wide receiver of Austin Peay, stud at the FCS level, moving up. Predictions all over the place on him, where he could go. Troy and Georgia Southern currently barely the top options, although Rivals has said that Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Indiana, Troy, and Northwestern are the ones that are battling for him. Chris Marshall, the five-star freshman wide receiver out of Texas A&M, he is out of there, suspended, kicked off the team, whatever have you. You can believe either Marshall or you can believe Jimbo Fisher. It doesn't really matter. Strong rumors out there that UNC would be involved, or not UNC, we talked about them so much today. USC, the Trojans, would be involved if Marshall became available. Have not gotten updated on that. Christian Leary, another wide receiver out of Alabama. Rivals has said that Florida State and UCF are the most involved there. I don't think I would love him on either one of those, but we'll see. And then two FCS wide receivers here that a lot of recruiting services have ranked very highly on their transfer portal rankings I thought were worth mentioning. Andrew Armstrong, wide receiver out of Texas A&M Commerce. Currently, a crystal ball predicted for him to go to Arkansas. On 3 shares this sentiment as well. That is the dude that I think could very much pull off the Traylon Burks, wide receiver 1 possible option there for them. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on there. And then last but not least, we have DeKeese Carter, the wide receiver out of Fordham. Very pass-heavy offense this year. He's one of 3 1,000-yard wide receivers on his team. Lot to like, in my opinion, but I'd have to see where he lands before we do a real deep dive on him. You boys have any quick thoughts on any of these 5, or are we ready to hit tight ends and get out of here?
I don't usually trust FCS receivers, but I think McCray could be fun at like a Louisville, the Western Kentucky, at Texas Tech. Just has to hit the right spot. But otherwise, I think interesting names, but these are single bullet, crazy long shots to me.
Gotcha. Brandon, real quick, any of them?
I was going to share McCray. It's probably one of my favorite FCS receivers. I think a great landing spot for him. Any G5. I would love in Western Kentucky, those type of spots. Chris Marshall just seems like a USC guy. I don't know why that sounds like it would fit perfectly, but it just sounds like it would fit. Just sounds like that one. Leary's been, from what I've heard, he's been talking to Javon Baker. That's the UCF connection that you're seeing on there as well. So Javon might be trying to get his buddy, from Alabama over to UCF to be with JRP. And the other, I've heard good things about, I call him DQ, but DQ Carter. I think another one like McCray, I think he's very close to being a guy that could break out in a good G5 spot. So definitely like these options.
All right. Let's hit up these tight ends and let's get out of here, boys. First up, we have Jaheim Bell, tight end out of South Carolina. Tight end 13 on the year. We knew that there was some angst there. His mother was very vocal on Twitter about him being misutilized. Got a little bit better towards the end of the year when they used him more at running back than they did as tight end or wide receiver. But he's gone. He's currently crystal ball to Florida State. So, Kay, real quick, does that excite you at all, the idea of Jaheim Bell going over to Florida State? Or are we kind of avoiding transfer tight ends altogether because this past year, the highest ranked transfer tight end was, I believe, tight end 35 on the year?
I think the class is so weak that, I would be fine with Bell at anywhere as long as it kind of makes sense. Florida State kind of makes sense. So I'm down for it. I think it's literally Brock Bowers and then 10 steps down and then the next, Jatavian Sanders from Texas, and then it's everybody else, right? So I think Bell could fall into a good spot. It just depends on offensive coordinator. But FSU feels fun. Louisville feels fun. He feels like a weird fit for Mississippi State. I don't know. Duke could be super interesting.
You're looking at the sheet there. Ignore that. That was the thing that got stuck in the header. That was
Oh, I was gonna
else.
say, like, what? That feels very weird.
No. Just Florida State right now.
I think anything on the East Coast, Southeast, Florida State, all those kind of schools kind of feel interesting enough.
Alrighty. We're going to keep moving on because these are tight ends, and we don't need to spend all the time on them. This one's interesting to me, though. Rivaldo Fairweather, tight end 33 in CFF this year, tight end out of FIU, leaving along with Tyrese Chambers. Very much looking to move up, and currently On3 has him at a 99.4% chance to go to the Auburn Tigers. I mentioned earlier, Auburn will be involved in the transfer portal this offseason. It looks like Fairweather is one of those weapons they're looking to get. Brandon, does this excite you whatsoever here?
It's more of a wait and see type situation. I'd say like a watch list one. I did have Fairweather as one of my watch lists. He was slowly climbing the ranks of tight end there in CFF this past season. I did like him better at FIU. Auburn might be interesting with Ashford. It just kind of depends on how that develops in the offseason. But for me, it would be a watch list situation. But he's looking like he's an Auburn guy. So I'm sure that excites you as a Georgia fan to have to go up against that.
All right, last tight end we'll touch on here. We got Mr. Erick All, tight end out of Michigan, left on some unsavory terms, it seems like, with the Michigan staff, but he looks like he is going to follow his teammate, Cade McNamara, over to Iowa. And again, that's your dream come true pretty much for any tight end prospect, is that they can go over to Iowa. Good friends with the quarterback, it seems like, which means he's probably going to get targeted a ton. Sam Laporta, very heavily rumored that he will be moving on to the draft this year. So Erick All looks like is your tight end for Iowa next year, which to me makes him immediately at least a tier 2 tight end going into CFF next year. That's pretty much my thoughts on it. Do either one of you boys have quick thoughts on it, or did I cover it pretty good there?
I think it's a great spot for him. I'm really curious about Luke Lachey because he looked really good. So it's really a battle of like, do they survive with 2? Honestly, the tight end 2 at Iowa could probably be still a top 25.
Ends,
yeah. So I think it's a great spot. It makes all the sense in the world, and there's a lot of like revenge narrative factor amongst All and Cade for sure.
Absolutely. Alrighty, quick. I'm gonna just run through these honorable mentions. Okay. Brandon, don't worry about answering to either one of these guys. CJ Dupree, tight end of Maryland, offered by Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. South Carolina currently the favorite. Replaced Jaheim Bell. Not super excited about that one. Kyle Morlock, we talked about him last week, the massive tight end out of Shorter University. Currently, his predictions are pretty much all over the place. Chris Hummer says, though, that Illinois and West Virginia are the 2 schools that are in the lead for him. I think either one of those would be a very, very interesting fit for him for CFF. All right, boys, we've made it. It was a long one, but we covered it. We made it through rain, literal rain and shine. We made it through this podcast. You guys have been absolutely awesome. Really appreciate your time that you guys have given us here tonight. Real quick, we talked about it at the top of the show, but Kay, we'll go with you first, and then Brandon, just feel free to plug anything you want here at the end before we get out of here.
Yeah, just more content. Bet on C2C podcast. We'll probably do something, or I'll maybe do a couple of videos on our random slates, some content in terms of articles for the bowl games, and then of course Burning the Red Shirt, which is at BTR_pod. I have to like really think about that one for a second, but yeah, anything at Campus to Canton. Lots of different things throughout the bowl season, and we'll hit off season and be able to sleep for a couple minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon, real quick, man, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, man, just keep on looking at campuscan.com, of course, the Bet on C2C. I want to shout out Kay and, of course, Austin for stepping in for, life changes and sometimes, and, there's sometimes we couldn't get the podcast on, but they were troopers and they carried on. So appreciate that. And also for Kay for the videos and just doing what you're doing, brother. You're doing a great job. It'll be returning for next year. So, you can bet on C2C that we'll be back for season 2. There's DFS and money to be won. So we'll be back at it starting in week 0 and probably a week or so before then. But until then, I am I'm switching over. It's now the Mindset the Future Freshman podcast. You'll probably see both of these gentlemen. I'm going to have Kay research some Cole Cabana for some Michigan and a few other of those players. Jared's going to pick 3 of his favorites in the season. So it'll be a good time. We'll be talking about freshmen. And of course, we bring back the big fish, small pond. And that's what I'm looking forward to. We'll get interviews from the upcoming freshmen as well. So we'll get to hear from the new class and, just their thoughts and things like that, and what they think about their recruiting and their process and stuff like that. I always love to hear those stories. We had some really great guests. I'm looking forward to kind of add into that. So just keep it on lock. You'll probably see that at the end of December, early January, and then by February we're going to get full swing and be back into it. So Future Freshman Podcast is back.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out everything that those guys just mentioned, and I will go ahead and throw you guys out there what's going on with CTN over the next couple of weeks. We're probably going to get one more pod in next week, but then we will be taking a short break because I will not be in town, and so I would love to keep the show going. But again, when you are off on vacation, there's nothing you can do much about that. So we'll be back in January. We'll be hitting the ground running. Late January, I'll be getting the first mock drafts out there. I'll be starting the ADP up. We'll be keeping track of all of the coaching changes, transfer portal news, all of that great stuff. Things we noticed from the bowl games, we will cover every single one of it. I'm ready to hit the ground running. Off season is one of my favorite time of the year because everything's speculation, and it is just a ton of fun to figure out what's going to happen. So really appreciate you boys coming on here. Really appreciate all of you guys listening, and we will see you guys next time. Have a wonderful and blessed day.